Tonight, I go back home to Georgia to look into the death of a young wife.
That Atlanta wife murdered as she opened her very own front door. An all-new 2020 starts right now.
This is a true murder mystery. Emphasis on murder, emphasis on mystery.
I felt like Lita's murder case looks like a true crime story, but it goes a lot deeper.
Who would kill this woman? She wasn't robbed. Somebody came to the door with roses and shot her dead.
Was there a feeling that this had to be pretty calculated?
She was shot with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
No obvious suspect.
Was she at all concerned about the fact that she was in an interracial marriage and that this was a difficult time in the South?
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff.
I want you to see the puzzle. When I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Your wife's best friend has been murdered, and police are looking at you. It's a chilly, drizzly winter Atlanta morning, and 35-year-old Lita McClinton is suddenly awakened.
It's around 8:15 in the morning, and she heard the doorbell ring. And she tightens up her rope and goes downstairs to open the door.
And I think she was probably not going to open it, but she looked through the keyhole and saw that the person had a box of flowers.
There was a man standing at the door, holding a long white box of long stem roses that had a big, thick pink ribbon around it.
So she receives the flowers, thinking that this is a delivery.
She was really excited. She thought that it was a gift from one of her friends.
In a sea of red brick townhouses, Lita's white one stands out. Her best friend Poppy and 3-year-old daughter have spent the night, and they are still in bed upstairs, just waking up.
Poppy hears her say, "Good morning," to the man at the door.
The flower delivery man produces a handgun. He fires a shot.
She actually put the box of roses in front of her face. The second shot went right through the center of her head, and she fell with a large thud.
Lita's friend Poppy was upstairs with her toddler, and right away she grabbed her daughter and hid her into a closet and said, "You gotta be quiet, quiet as a mouse." She didn't know if the gunman was gonna come for her. Lita's neighbor hears the shots, then sees the guy running like a bat out of hell, just booking it out of the complex, and he calls 911.
The first police officer is only a few blocks away, and he gets the call, and so that police officer ends up holding Lita's hand. They thought Lita was completely unconscious, and yet she managed to squeeze his hand as he kept comforting her and telling her everything was going to be okay. And he said it was her comforting him. Poppy got out of the closet and called Lita's mother, and she couldn't get words out, and she finally just said, "Lita's been shot." Lita's mother called her husband. When they went to the hospital, they were put in a separate little waiting room. The doctor tended to Lita, and he came out about 30 minutes later and said, "I'm sorry."
Torn up. It'll never get easier because she's gone. We should have gone first, not her.
Atlanta's exclusive Buckhead neighborhood is known for its sprawling mansions, not murder. So when the shooting happened right here, neighbors were shocked and on edge.
Sullivan was found in the doorway of her townhouse, shot twice in the head.
It's pretty surprising that in this area, those kinds of things probably wouldn't happen.
How did you learn that Lita had been killed?
I ran to the TV because I heard Sullivan on Slayton Drive.
Police say a box of roses was found near her body. The gunman apparently posed as a delivery man.
And I said, oh my God, that's Lita.
Detectives on the scene found a bullet fragment, 2 shell casings, and the box of roses.
2 gunshots from a 9mm penetrated the box. The weapon was never found. To this day, it's never been found.
In this case, you had just a minor amount of evidence.
At the time, it was the top story on the news, and law enforcement officers felt a great deal of pressure in order to bring Lita's killer to justice.
For years, Lita's case was cold, buried underneath the weight of unanswered questions and fading memories.
I'm Deb Miller-Landau, and I just wrote a book called A Devil Went Down to Georgia about the murder of Lita McClinton Sullivan. I covered this story for Atlanta Magazine back in 2004, and the more people I talked to, the more that I researched, the more I felt like I began to know Lita. So talking about the day that she died feels personal.
The case was also personal to Clint Rucker, the prosecutor. When I came to Atlanta to meet up with him, I learned that one of his passions is puzzles, working from the outside in, which also translates to solving homicides. Where do you begin? How do you start to connect?
When I'm putting together a puzzle, not only in real life, but also a murder case, I make an assessment about what it is I'm working with. I start to identify pieces of the puzzle that are foundational.
Lita's murder case looks like a true crime story, but it goes a lot deeper. It's a story about love and loss and greed.
Lita had been reared in Atlanta's Black elite.
You know, on the surface, she was living an Atlanta dream.
A prosperous upbringing.
A very prosperous upbringing. The expectations for her life were pretty high.
Black women have had to be exceptional in order to be seen. And that was the case then, and I think it's still the case now.
One thing seems certain, a murder of this kind is personal.
Was there a feeling that this had to be pretty calculated?
Police knew almost immediately Lita Sullivan was the intended victim.
Who would kill this woman? She wasn't robbed. Somebody came to the door with roses and shot her dead.
Atlanta had its fair share of crime, but this was most certainly one of the highest profile cases that got reported in the news.
Sullivan was shot twice in the head. A box of roses found next to her body.
Using a flower delivery man and shooting her, it was something that just kind of stuck out to me.
Atlanta, Georgia, billed as a vibrant melting pot, a destination for creatives. But if you grew up in Georgia in the 1970s, as I did, you know this was a very different place then. One still emerging from the dark shadows of segregation and racial tensions. What was 1970s Atlanta like when she was sort of coming along?
We've got African Americans that are kind of ascending into really prominent positions. Lita also is ascending because her parents are part of this movement.
Lita's parents, Emory and Joanne McClinton, were both power players, movers and shakers in Atlanta.
Emory McClinton was on the State Board of Transportation. Joanne McClinton was a member of the Georgia legislature.
Joanne will tell you stories about being in really interpersonal meetings with Dr. King.
She was the Maynard Jackson's campaign manager when he ran for mayor.
I think the McClintons had high expectations for who Lita would become. Lita Sullivan was a true daughter of Atlanta.
She was just a gem, very, very proper.
And she had grown up in a world of cotillions, so she really was sort of that classic upper crust black person growing up in Atlanta.
She knew where she was going.
She had a great sense of style.
And absolutely charming.
After high school, she went on to Spelman College. Her parents sort of hoped that she would enter the political arena like they were, but she was very much into fashion. She was working at a boutique at Lenox Square, and in walks this guy who had unruly curls and weird glasses and just immediately saw Lita and was taken with her.
Fresh out of college, 24-year-old Lita is smitten with James, Jim Sullivan. He's a bit older, 35, and he's also white.
He showered her with gifts. He just completely showered her with attention.
He comes in, he dazzles her. What did you learn about him?
I learned that what he saw was a fantasy in Lita. I think he looked at her as a young, very attractive, very smart African-American female.
Another big difference between them is class. Lita has been raised in Atlanta's high society and Jim on Boston's gritty South Side.
He grew up in a very middle to lower middle class environment.
He went to Holy Cross College, got a bachelor's degree in economics.
He always wanted more for himself. He always wanted to be a rich person, but it didn't seem like that was in the cards. He was an accountant. He was working hard, but he really wasn't getting ahead.
But life is about to change for Jim Sullivan when he inherits a thriving liquor distributorship from his uncle, worth millions of dollars.
Crown Beverages was worth around $3.2 million. Jim had become a wealthy man. So when the McClintons met Jim for the first time, they were like, who is this guy? He had this kind of manner that was very uncouth and brash, and they were sort of mystified about what their daughter saw in him. I mean, I think the only thing they had in common was that he was Catholic and they were Catholic as well. But everything else was complete polar opposites.
Another concern, of course, was race. Remember, this is the 70s. Even though the country is watching color barriers slipping away on the hit show The Jeffersons, with primetime's first interracial couple.
Your parents have never gotten over the fact that I'm white.
That's because you never got over being white.
At that time, this was unusual.
Georgia's anti-miscegenation laws that forbade blacks and whites to marry had only been repealed 10 years earlier.
Still, despite their obvious differences, Jim Sullivan pops the question to Lita.
So the McClintons were like, you cannot marry this man.
They felt like Lita was really making a mistake and was kind of caught up in the exuberance of this relationship.
Despite her parents' strong objections, Lita and Jim are engaged. But on the eve of her wedding, Jim drops a bomb.
He tells Lita that he has been married before and that he has 4 children. Lita was shocked.
And then, the very same night, Jim Sullivan blindsides his bride-to-be again.
He whips out a piece of paper and he says, can you sign this? And then she looks down and sees that he's drawn up a prenuptial agreement. And she's like, what is this?
Apparently determined to protect his newfound wealth, Sullivan surprises Lita with a prenup, which says that in the event of a divorce, she would walk away with virtually nothing. She's reluctant, but the cake is ordered, the flowers are ready, so Lita signs the agreement and ties the knot anyway.
Lita got married in 1976. It was a small ceremony in Macon, Georgia. Joanne McClinton would later describe that as the worst day of her life.
The newlyweds settle some 80 miles south of Atlanta near Jim's business in Macon. It's a world away from Atlanta. But Lita agrees to give up her current job and her income and become full-time Mrs. Jim Sullivan.
They bought a house in Shirley Hills, a very affluent, very white part of Macon. Joanne and Emery McClinton feared for their daughter. Being part of an interracial couple in Macon, Georgia in the 1970s would have been extraordinarily challenging. The neighbors were like, you have the gall to bring a black wife to Shirley Hills. People threw garbage on their doorstep.
The out-and-out racism had to be tough for Lita. But she moves forward and makes some new connections and friends, including Yvette Miller.
When Lita and Yvette occasionally go out to eat, she notices something a bit curious.
We'd go out to lunch at a nice restaurant, and she couldn't pay the bill. And I would end up picking up the check.
And they were a wealthy couple.
They were very wealthy.
Then one Christmas season, a card arrives in the mail addressed to Jim. Lita opens it, and what she discovers will make her question everything. Lita and Jim Sullivan's first few months of marriage seemed to be going well.
They were both intelligent, both attractive, definitely upper class, high society.
But just beneath the surface, there's some obvious cracks.
They seemed to be loving at first.
At first?
He was not that nice to her, and he was not that kind to her.
Was he brusque? Was he brash?
He was a bit arrogant. Even though he had all of these resources, he did not, in my opinion, take care of his wife.
Friends say that the once generous millionaire has suddenly become a miser.
He was notoriously cheap.
He would wear his dead uncle's clothes around the house. He would use the sheath from the dry cleaning as saran wrap in the kitchen. He didn't want Lita to work, but he kept her on a very tight allowance where he gave her $150 a week.
Did she express any discontentment with her marriage?
When we were at those restaurants, Jim just does not give me enough money to take care of me and the house. You know, she clearly was not happy.
Was there talk of infidelity?
Lita had several instances where she questioned whether or not her husband was actually having an affair.
One day she finds a long blonde hair in their master bathroom, and she asks Jim about it, and he says, I don't know what you're talking about. They got into this cycle of, she accused him of philandering. He would deny it, and then he would buy her sort of an expensive jewelry apology.
Then, during the holidays one year, Lita makes another stunning discovery.
A Christmas card came addressed to Jim. She opened it. A woman wrote in something like, missing your kisses. The woman's return address was on the envelope, so Lita went and spoke to her, and the woman said that she had been having an affair with Jim.
Lita is distraught and goes home to be with her parents in Atlanta. But her husband manages to lure her back, increasing her weekly allowance in a now post-nuptial agreement.
Now it's $300 instead of $150 a week, but it still shows that all of their assets belong to Jim.
That's right, the successful business, Lita's Mercedes, multiple properties, even her jewelry, still belong to her husband in the event of a divorce.
But in an attempt at reconciliation, Lita signs the postnup.
Just a few months after Lita signs that agreement, without Lita knowing, Sullivan decides to sell Crown Beverages for $5 million.
And that's not all. He tells her they're moving to Palm Beach, Florida.
Lita was in shock.
She had included he was going to whistle her down to Palm Beach.
But Lita's new Florida home, located a stone's throw from what would become Mar-a-Lago, is more elaborate than she ever would have imagined. called Casa Alita. It's a 17,000 square foot mansion with 8 oceanfront bedrooms.
It was just unbelievable.
When you went to Jim's home, you go through this tunnel and you would be at the beach. It's your own private beach.
But for Lita, everything that glitters isn't exactly gold.
James Sullivan very much wanted to integrate himself into the upper echelons of society, and his aspirations did not include Lita's participation.
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live. And when he found out that to sort of scale the level of social plateau he was looking at in Palm Beach, having a black wife was a serious impediment to that.
She was left out of some affairs, and she really became upset.
So even though they had money, this is a moneyed crowd, didn't really matter though.
He was barely rich compared to Palm Beach.
Did he want to be in that crowd?
Oh yes, he wanted to, be accepted as one of the rich and famous.
It doesn't take long before Jim starts to flirt with other women.
And it's at a cocktail party that one particularly elegant Palm Beach woman catches Sullivan's eye.
Jim sees Suki Rogers, who is a Korean-born socialite.
She was telegenic. She had a spicy personality. I think a man like Jim Sullivan could not help but be intrigued by this beautiful woman.
They started dating. He's still married to Lita.
By now, the Sullivans have been married nearly 10 years, but things are about to explode.
Lita finds women's lingerie in their master bed. It's the bra that broke the camel's back.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff and I'm going back home.
Lita arrives back in Atlanta. The very next day, she files for divorce from Jim.
But Sullivan fights Lita every step of the way, and the divorce drags on.
Did she seem concerned, worried, nervous about her breakup?
What I detected was she was excited and she was cutting the cord and leaving Jim alone. She wanted her life back.
While Lita is looking forward to a new life of freedom, she can't be happy about the prospect of leaving her marriage with virtually nothing. No career, no Palm Beach mansion, no Buckhead townhouse, and $2,500 a month in alimony for 3 years. So Lita is going to divorce court, determined to fight for what she believes she deserves.
All she wanted was a reasonable financial settlement so that she could kind of go on with her life.
January 16th, 1987 was set up to be a pivotal day in the lives of Lita and Jim Sullivan.
A judge was going to decide whether or not to throw out the postnuptial agreement.
She might get as much as close to $1 million in cash and assets.
The morning of January 16th, Lita Sullivan, she'd lose her life that day in a murder.
With Lita out of the picture, Jim Sullivan stands to gain the property that they had and retain control over all his money.
Sullivan was the main suspect.
That is, until a treasure trove of secret recordings of Lita's private conversations are uncovered, taking this investigation in a whole new direction. And police are looking at you.
You make a big circle and you put everybody in it that's close to Lita. Everybody's a suspect. But the first one would be the husband.
The first and obvious suspect was James Sullivan, who stood to gain everything from her death, all the property, all the monies, and who was contesting the divorce.
Detectives went down to speak to him in Palm Beach, and they put him through a polygraph.
Jim Sullivan not only passes the polygraph, but there's something else. He has an alibi that puts him nearly 700 miles away from the crime scene.
James Sullivan was actually in Palm Beach at the time of Lita's murder.
When you first look at it, it looks pretty cut and dry. When you interview all the people involved, everybody points in one direction, towards the husband. But when you sit down and look at the facts, I'm not so sure that the husband is the person that committed the crime.
Nothing surfaced in the early stages of the investigation that implicated Jim Sullivan in the murder.
Sullivan is cooperating with authorities, and during his interview with detectives, he mentions the name of his friend, Marvin Marable.
At the time of Lita's death, Marvin and James Sullivan had a very close relationship.
Remember, Marvin Marable is married to Lita's best friend, Poppy, who was in the Buckhead townhouse with her 3-year-old daughter the morning that Lita was murdered. But back before the shooting, the friendship hadn't always sat well with Marvin.
When Lita moved back to Atlanta, they started, hanging out together.
So she's disillusioned by her relationship. Did her failed relationship have any impact on your relationship?
Well, from the standpoint of them, being together all the time and going out, yeah.
Commiserating.
Oh, absolutely. Certainly didn't help. And I can understand her being there for her friend, but, sometimes you can go overboard, which is what happened in our relationship.
Marable, a former New York State trooper turned entrepreneur, says Lita would often spend hours at his home with Poppy. And it was during this time, he says, coincidentally or not, that his own marriage began to unravel.
I found a letter where Poppy was planning to file for divorce.
So she was planning to file for divorce without your knowledge?
Oh, yeah.
That had to be a shocker.
It was.
So then you decided to try something a little questionable after that.
I have a background in law enforcement. I don't see it as questionable. It's your own telephone in your own house. I put a recorder on the, people call it a tap, on the phone, and I started recording conversations.
In the house phone?
Mm-hmm. On the house phone.
He began listening to Poppy and Lita's conversations and ended up recording more than 300 hours.
And during those very personal conversations between girlfriends, Marvin Marable learns that there may be some information that James Sullivan might be interested in learning that will be helpful for him in his divorce case.
He tells Sullivan about the tapes and what's on them, specifically Lita's post-divorce plans.
And soon enough, the two disgruntled husbands are conspiring to get the best of their soon-to-be ex-wives in divorce court.
Marvin Marable travels down to Palm Beach under a false name, and the two men listen to the tapes, and Marvin says, "I'm not going to record anymore," and Jim says, no, keep recording.
Was there talk of money?
Yeah, he offered $30,000.
Jim says to Marvin, if the judge decides to honor the postnuptial agreement, he's going to give Marvin $30,000 for the use of the information on the tapes.
What kinds of things did Lita talk about that could be helpful to either one of you?
There were some guys that, she would talk to, but she was legally separated.
But then, just a few days after Marvin and Jim's secret meeting at Casa Elita,
Poppy and Lita somehow discovered the recording device.
How did they react?
It wasn't nice. She filed for divorce the next day.
She was angry.
She was very angry.
Lita was upset too, so upset that she reported Marvin to the authorities, and he was charged with possession of an eavesdropping device. So when police questioned Sullivan about who might have a motive to murder his wife, he tells them to look no further than Marvin Marable.
And sure enough, only a few days after Lita's death, Marvin is being questioned by the Atlanta Police Department about Lita's murder.
I go down for the interview, and the first thing they did is read me my rights. And from there on, it was just a nightmare. I was a prime suspect.
You have a law enforcement background, so you knew what police
So I knew that I was being followed. I could pick the investigators, police, could pick them out all the time. Jim had mentioned my name to them. He said, look at Marvin Merrill.
This was serious stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How worried were you?
I was very worried.
Joanne and Emery McClinton were beyond devastated. Their eldest daughter was dead. Just 3 days after Lita's murder, they held a funeral.
Days dissolve into months, and authorities are no closer to finding Lita Sullivan's murderer.
The case is just sort of growing colder and colder by the minute.
And while Marvin Maribel might have been angry at Lita for pressing those charges against him for eavesdropping, there was no evidence he was responsible for her death.
I know that people get wrongly accused, wrongly convicted, and so the only saving grace is the fact that I knew I was innocent.
By process of elimination is you can determine the pieces that don't fit.
And just eliminate them.
The way in which we eliminated Marvin Maribel as a suspect. There was just not enough to connect him directly to the crime itself.
As for that eavesdropping device charge, Marvin was put on probation, which he completed, and then he was exonerated. But on those recordings Maribel made, Lita had talked about other men, something that her soon-to-be ex-husband Sullivan pointed out to police.
He made allegations that she was participating in extramarital affairs, and that perhaps this was the action of, you know, a disgruntled boyfriend.
We have a lot of major players. At this point in the investigation, we have a lot of suspects.
One of the first men police question is a professional athlete.
Lita and him had been friends when she was in Palm Beach. The police quickly found out that he was in prison for drug possession.
That athlete is behind bars when Lita is killed, so clearly he can't be the trigger man. Then investigators turn their sights to a prominent Atlanta businessman.
And he and Lita had been childhood friends, and they sort of rekindled their friendship. And they realized that he had no motive, and they found nothing that connected him.
Authorities also take a hard look at another suitor who had taken Lita to dinner the night before her death, and get this, had also given her 2 roses.
The suspect was a man named Bob Daniel, and Bob had had an incident a couple months before the murder where, in a drunken rage, he came to Lita's house, smashed his car into the garage, and as the cops were taking him away, he said, "I'm gonna kill that." So, serious red flag.
But that lead didn't go anywhere either.
Bob had just had quadruple bypass surgery. You know, the police ultimately decided that Bob had nothing to do with it.
It's the unknowing that makes it so difficult. And to know that there are individuals who may be walking around now planning and plotting to do the same thing to somebody else is abhorrent to me.
I remember having the impression it was like a festering wound for them.
The McClintons want to draw attention to a $25,000 reward in the case.
The cause of finding justice for Lita became their obsession, became their passion.
The reward is for the arrest and conviction of those individuals responsible for our daughter's murder.
To catch Lita's killer, the Atlanta Police Department assigns 2 veteran detectives to the case.
If Lieutenant Walker bears a resemblance to actor Billy D. Williams, Welcome Harris reminds one of Columbo, the dogged, disheveled detective of television fame.
Building a murder case was like making a mosaic. You know, you get a shiny piece of glass here, a gem there. You put it together and you hope that from it emerges the shimmering image of a killer.
This particular case deals with what I consider to be high society. It contains a little bit of everything. intrigue, mystery.
These days, a lot of murders are solved using DNA technology, ring camera technology. But back then, it was detective work.
She was shot with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
Most important thing found at the crime scene was the roses.
They canvassed all the area flower shops and quickly found that the roses had been purchased at the Botany Bay flower shop.
They interviewed the worker in there, and he told them that this guy came in about 8 o'clock and bought these roses and paid in cash and then left. And he was in a small car.
The florist gave a description of the man buying the flowers and another man who was waiting in the car.
So detectives know they're looking for at least 2 men.
Until yet another person is described to police. That flower delivery man who had looked Lita's neighbor right in the eye.
There was a next-door neighbor of Lita's, lived over on the right side of her condo. He lived there. His name was Bob Christensen.
He actually gave a description of the flower delivery man as a Caucasian, middle-aged man.
They went down to the police station and worked with a police artist and got sketches. As the sketches were being completed, the officers were realizing, obviously, that the shooter was not Jim Sullivan and that the other individuals were all 3 distinct individuals. They didn't look anything like each other, so therefore we knew 3 people were involved.
For investigators, this has all the earmarks of only one thing: murder for hire.
All the evidence pointed to a hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, and firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
With investigators now exploring the possibility that Lita was murdered by a hired gunman, another critical piece of evidence comes to light: a mysterious phone call.
And what they found was that on the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call that was placed from a payphone right outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Was this a call from the killer?
I don't know about you, I haven't had a collect call from a payphone, so as a cop you probably go, I wonder if that's connected.
And a tip from a woman 700 miles away may just be the big break investigators have been waiting for.
I said, anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
A hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
You figure out what fits and what doesn't fit.
I want everyone listening to this to know that I am absolutely innocent.
The loss of a daughter.
They still don't have the murder weapon.
But they do have witnesses.
Do you know anybody who can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
Anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers.
You actually brought in a doorbell. Why?
To have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder. She's about to meet her maker.
It's a deadly delivery of a dozen pink roses. 35-year-old Lita McClinton Sullivan opens her front door and is suddenly gunned down.
On the year anniversary of Lita's death, there are no named suspects. They still don't have the murder weapon. They don't have a hitman. They don't have a paper trail that ties Jim or anyone else to a hit.
But that's about to change when they get Jim Sullivan's phone records.
On the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour or so after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call to James Sullivan's home in Palm Beach, Florida.
It turns out to be from a rest stop in Suwanee, Georgia, maybe 30 or 40 miles from Buckhead. Using a phone call to call another state, that opens up federal jurisdiction. In this case, that's the FBI.
We believed the phone call from Suwanee rest stop to his home in Palm Beach, Florida, was sufficient indication that a contract hitter may have called him after doing the job.
Enter Special Agent John Kingston, who takes a particular interest in that phone call and a whole slew of other calls Jim Sullivan made and received around the time of Lita's murder.
I got a whole year's worth, 6 months before the murder to 6 months after the murder.
Kingston notices a few calls, and one of them was to Bob Christensen, Lita's neighbor. When Kingston talks to Bob, he finds out that Jim had called Bob 3 days before the murder.
Sullivan said, had he seen anything suspicious around Lita's townhouse?
And Bob finds it strange. He hasn't talked to Jim in over a year.
Bob Christensen shares something else with Agent Kingston. On the same day Jim Sullivan called him, 3 days before the fatal flower delivery, Lita heard a loud knock on her door at 5 or 6 in the morning. It was so early and so unnerving, she didn't answer it.
So that made the call that he got from Jim even more suspicious.
Kingston also finds that a call is made between Jim's house and a Howard Johnson's motel in Atlanta, just a couple of miles from Lita's house. This is really strange. One thing that he's learned about Jim is that he's not a Hojo's kind of guy. So he goes to the Howard Johnsons and asks if he can look through the records.
They gave me the shoebox with all the registration cards, and I pick out 3 that I thought, well, these are awfully interesting. So I said, do you guys have the phone records? They said, yeah, sure we do. And I'm thinking, boy, these people keep really good records, and they keep them for a long time, and I'm really glad. They bring me the phone records for January 13th. I'm flipping through them, and all of a sudden I see 305 Palm Beach, South Florida area code. And I'm pretty sure it's Jim's number. And so I check my records real quick, and I go, yep, that's his number. And then I look, and I said, oh, look, it's from 518. That's one of the 3 cards I pulled out. Well, it just so happens I have a copy of it here. And one of the things it imparts is 3 individuals checked into the room. The individual who actually registered used the name Johnny Furr, but 3 individuals is important to me because I think 3 people involved in the crime. They put their car down as a Toyota 85 with a North Carolina plate. We believe that a Toyota was the getaway car for the murder. So there's 2 coincidences already.
But remember, these motel records are from January 13th. Lita was murdered 3 days later on the 16th. Special Agent Kingston is beginning to surmise that the killers may have tried and failed to get to her once before.
What I believe it to be is the killers having come down 3 days before the actual murder was committed, knocking on her door, her not answering it, and them having to stop and regroup and figure out what plan B is going to be. So I am in love with this registration card and becomes the focal point of my life for the next several months.
Kingston's next move is to locate this so-called Johnny Furr with the North Carolina license plate.
And to my surprise, there are 150 John or Johnny Furrs in North Carolina. But to my great surprise, 115 of these 150 are in a very small circle in North Carolina, between the 3 cities of Albemarle, Concord, and Kannapolis.
They're going to knock on every door and find this Johnny Furr. Of course, they're coming from Georgia, and anytime the FBI goes and investigates in another state, they need that state's approval. And just as they're about to get to the state border, their boss calls them and says, North Carolina's denying you entry, and they'll take it from here.
And that pretty much kills my case. That kills my case.
Yeah, soon after that, Agent Kingston is transferred to another job, and that whole investigation just sort of fades away. Meantime, in Palm Beach, Jim and Suki are living the high life. So with Lita out of the picture, Jim is free to marry Suki, which he does 8 months after Lita's murder.
He's thinking that he's the cat's meow. Eating in restaurants in Palm Beach, going to parties, got another attractive woman on his arm.
Jim drives around town in a Rolls Royce and gets into a fender bender and has to go to traffic court. Jim says to the judge, well, you've misunderstood. I wasn't even driving that day. Suki was driving. So the judge says, we're gonna throw it out. However, the cop who was on the scene catches wind and he says Suki wasn't even in the car that day. It was Jim driving alone. So now Jim has perjured himself, as has Suki.
Jim ultimately got convicted of perjury, was given a year probation and a year of home confinement.
Suki Sullivan also receives a year of probation.
Suki's freaking out. When she gets charged with perjury on his behalf, she's like, I'm done with this. Suki files for divorce from Jim. And the trial that follows is the juiciest, craziest gossip in town. So when it's Suki's turn to testify, she drops a bomb.
Did he talk to you about his former wife, Lita?
Yes.
Tell me what it was he said to you about Lita.
You can hear a pin drop. It's a big moment. After 33 months of marriage, Suki files for divorce from Jim.
Not surprisingly, it's another disputed divorce. But what might have been typical testimony about alimony takes a sudden turn in court.
Tell me what it was he said to you about Lita.
He hired someone to better for her.
I'm sorry?
He hired someone to better for her.
She claimed that he confessed to her that he had Lita killed.
This became a bombshell in the investigation of the murder of Lita Sullivan.
Suki Sullivan's divorce testimony may be big news for the FBI, but it has zero impact on the divorce judgment, which favors her husband, Jim Sullivan, in nearly every way.
His divorce was complete, but his life with turmoil was just beginning.
The opulent ocean-facing Palm Beach Palace may look like something out of The Great Gatsby, but while we watched, a new chapter in a crime story was unfolding.
We develop information here at WSB. There's going to be a raid on Jim Sullivan's Palm Beach mansion, and that is the biggest break in the Lita Sullivan case since the murder itself.
Investigators from the FBI, Atlanta Police, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation were on the grounds of a mansion identified as that of James Sullivan.
All of a sudden, Jim Sullivan is clearly in the crosshairs of federal authorities.
They got a tip that Jim, now a convicted felon, has guns in the house. Of course, you're not allowed to have guns if you're a convicted felon. So they put together a sweeping affidavit to get a search warrant.
We did see a number of guns loaded into a car and this box carried out.
When they found the guns, he was in violation of his probation, and so he went to jail for 9 months.
All this time, a federal grand jury has been convening in Atlanta.
They've got what they found in the mansion. They got what they found in the phone records. They've got Suki Sullivan. They've got the neighbors. What they don't have are the identities of the hit team. There's a problem, though.
We, the federal government, have a 5-year statute of limitations, which is going to be up on January 16th of '92.
With 5 or 6 days to go before it expired, the U.S. attorney made a bold decision. We're going to take our best shot with what we got right now, so they indict Jim Sullivan.
Jim Sullivan is indicted on multiple counts of arranging Lita's murder for hire through interstate phone calls.
Millionaire James V. Sullivan is on trial in connection with an alleged murder for hire plot. Here he arrives for the first day of trial testimony.
It was a trial that transfixed Atlanta. I mean, it was something we were covering on basically a daily basis, but we couldn't have it on camera because it's federal court.
It looks like the family is finally gonna have some accountability for the murder of their daughter, Lita.
The prosecution suggests the killers were calling Sullivan from the rest stop to say the job was done. The defense suggests otherwise.
Jim Sullivan is lawyered up with the best criminal defense lawyers that you can find anywhere in Atlanta and maybe in the whole country.
There is no evidence at this point in this case who placed that call or whether that call was placed by anyone connected with the crime.
The prosecutor spent 2 weeks telling their side of the story.
Suki, the woman he married months after Lita's death, delivered some of the most dramatic testimony the jury has heard.
They build what they feel like is a really strong case.
And then a big bombshell hits.
The judge says, I'm forced to dismiss this case for lack of evidence.
Judge Marvin Shube ruled that, in effect, even if Sullivan may have been involved in the murder for hire, the government fell short in proving the phone calls related to the murder.
Well, this is one of the most difficult decisions I had to make because I firmly believe in the jury system.
And then he looks at Jim and he says, you've been acquitted.
This was ultra shocking.
Suddenly it's over, and Jim is a free man.
I want everyone listening to this to know that I am absolutely innocent. I had nothing to do with Lita's death. Her death was a great tragedy, and I thank God and my attorneys that this ordeal is over.
The family at that point, I guess, is just sort of at a loss. How devastating was that for them?
They felt like the justice system had let them down.
I was not expecting this. It's extremely difficult.
The system today is weighed in the favor of the defense.
James Sullivan seems to have gotten away with murder.
But Lita's parents aren't giving up.
They file a wrongful death suit in Palm Beach, Florida, and they win.
We, the jury, return the following verdict.
The jury deems that Jim is guilty of wrongful death.
Total damages of the estate of Lita McClinton Sullivan, $4 million.
But Sullivan is able to hide his assets and not pay any of the civil judgment.
Jim Sullivan appealed their civil judgment, and he won by having the Florida court say that they had filed it after the Florida statute of limitations.
Once again, Jim has wiggled out of any responsibility, and the family is left dumbfounded.
Until
a call is received out of the blue.
A young woman comes forward. It proved to be the break in the case that everyone was looking for.
"11 years have gone by since Lita Sullivan was gunned down on her doorstep when a tip comes in from a town 700 miles away.
A call is received out of the blue, and the individual calling is an attorney in Beaumont, Texas. He has a receptionist whose name is Belinda Trahan, who has told him a very unusual story about her boyfriend, Tony Harwood.
Belinda and Tony lived together in Albemarle, North Carolina. And he was a long-distance truck driver for North American Van Lines.
He basically drove a moving truck.
Belinda tells her boss about a time that Tony came home from a long-haul trucking trip and said that a rich white man in Florida offered to pay him to, quote, take care of his black wife in Georgia. At the time, Belinda didn't believe it. She thought he must be cheating on her.
Belinda thought that it was Tony just trying to get out of town and go down to Atlanta to the strip bars.
Until he took her to meet this rich white guy in a diner somewhere, and he got a wad full of money.
She says he sits down briefly in their booth and gives Tony Harwood the balance owed for the hit on the man's wife.
Belinda Trahan tells her boss that soon after this bizarre trip, she broke up with Tony Harwood and moved to Texas. But now, 11 years later, she says that he mysteriously reached out to her again, asking her to meet him at a nearby truck stop.
She's afraid that he may commit harm to her.
And it's this new tip from Belinda Trahan that sends Georgia authorities to the Lone Star State, turning up the heat on an otherwise cold case.
Georgia Bureau of Investigator Agent John Lang takes a detective from the Atlanta Police Department and goes down to Texas to talk to Belinda.
She was with Tony when they met this mysterious man at this diner that they were meeting at. We wanted to show her a lineup of pictures in hopes that she could pick Sullivan out of it.
And she takes her pink fingernail and taps right on Jim Sullivan's face and says, "This is the man."
My plan of attack was to get some recordings with her and Tony. So we got her to get in touch with Tony again.
She's talking to him and trying to coax information out of him, knowing John Lang is listening on her end. And Tony gives enough information that places him at the scene at the time.
We had the phone calls with Tony. She picked Jim Sullivan out of the lineup, but there was still more investigation to do. We really didn't know who Tony Harwood was.
John Lang knows that Tony worked at North American Van Lines. So he calls up North American Van Lines and he says, "Hey, you don't happen to have your records from 11 years ago?" And the guy says, "Yeah, there's some boxes full of files up in a musty attic. You're more than welcome to go poke around."
We went up into a hot attic and opened the first box that I went through. And about the third document I looked at was Jim Sullivan. His address was on it, Palm Beach, Florida. His signature was on it, and Tony Harwood's signature was on it.
He finds a bill of lading showing that Tony Harwood moved furniture for Jim Sullivan 2 months before the murder. And it's the paper trail he needs. It's like the jackpot.
Astounding. I don't know any other way to explain it. I mean, open this box and like the third record I look at, here it is. I mean, it just like it was meant to be.
On a Sunday morning in April of 1998, John Lang and local authorities go knock on Tony's door in Albemarle, North Carolina. Tony answers the door.
And he said, "You know, I've been waiting on you boys for a long time."
They take Tony to the Albemarle police station. Lang interviews Tony for 3 hours in this tiny room. But at the end of the day, Tony admits to taking money from Jim, $25,000, to take care of Lita. He also tells the detectives that he wasn't the one to pull the trigger, but that he was there the day of the murder.
He went through the whole case, and throughout the interview, he incriminated himself even more. I mean, admitted that he was there. He knew what happened. So he was arrested for murder of Lita Sullivan, and we took him back to Atlanta that day.
After Tony's arrest, things moved pretty quickly.
We are here today to announce the issuance of a warrant for the arrest of James V. Sullivan.
They got enough to get Sullivan, and now boom. Sullivan hears of this and blows. He takes off.
We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
He's just gone, vanished.
Investigators say he could be anywhere.
He is nowhere to be found.
We certainly do not know where Mr. Sullivan is. We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
More than a decade after his wife Lita was murdered, Jim Sullivan seems to be playing a game of catch me if you can with authorities.
There is an international manhunt for James Sullivan.
Well, Jim had moved to Costa Rica, actually bought a home there. In 1998, after an arrest warrant was issued for him, he immediately, like that night, went to Panama.
If you have any information concerning James Sullivan, you should contact the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate.
We didn't know exactly where he had flown from Panama, and we didn't know exactly where he had gone.
His trail goes cold.
They put him on Interpol, and it was just cold.
They've tapped phone lines, anybody that he might have called, and he's called no one, not even his mother.
There was a few tips that came in. The tips are just dead ends.
The McClintons, they're dumbfounded that this guy could, get away again.
But in late 1999, with Sullivan still completely off the grid, the heartbroken Emery and Joanne McClinton do get some good news.
Last week came this, a court decision reinstating a $4 million judgment against Jim Sullivan in connection with a wrongful death case brought in effect by Lita's estate.
Lita's family and law enforcement officials hope that a renewed hunt for Sullivan's money will help smoke him out.
Where you find Sullivan's money, you're going to find him close by.
But even this goes nowhere.
Fast forward to 2002. There is no sign of Jim Sullivan.
We tried every effort in our arsenal to try and locate him, to put him on the FBI's wanted list, but to also put him on the top 10 list, which is very unusual. You don't get on the top 10 list very easily. Then we also featured him on America's Most Wanted.
The most recent picture we have of Sullivan is at least 5 years old, so the FBI age-enhanced this photo, which may bear a closer resemblance to Sullivan's appearance today. If you recognize James Sullivan from either of these photographs, call us now at 1-800-CRIME-TV.
A man sees America's Most Wanted on television and goes, I know that guy. He lives in my condo complex in Chiam, Thailand. And sure enough, he calls the authorities.
He went to Panama, to Venezuela, and eventually to Thailand, where he got a beachfront condo.
He spends his days walking on the beach, sitting by the pool, occasionally playing tennis, as though no other troubles in the world. The Thai police knock on Jim Sullivan's door on July 2nd, 2002, and say, you're under arrest. The McClintons can hardly believe it.
We found out from the FBI, and that was a moment of jubilation.
15 years is a long time to concentrate on the loss of a daughter. And we had determination, and we had the will, but we also had all of these individuals behind us.
Almost as soon as Jim Sullivan is arrested for murder, Tony Harwood, who has continued to deny being the trigger man, agrees to a plea deal.
Tony kind of sees the writing on the wall.
Harwood just decided that he would plead guilty, a negotiated plea for manslaughter, and that, in turn, that he would testify against Jim Sullivan.
It took 2 years, but he finally was extradited back to Atlanta in 2004.
He got off the plane. He was wearing a single shoe because he had such terrible gout in his foot. But he gets off and gets taken to Fulton County Jail. And there's this sort of cumulative sigh of relief.
To be clear, Sullivan being tried for murder in Georgia is not double jeopardy. For one thing, it is a state case, and the previous one was a federal case, and that specifically was for arranging Lita's murder for hire over the phone.
The elected district attorney appoints me, along with a couple of other lawyers, to prosecute the case.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
Right.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
There's no cutting corners, and you spread the pieces out, and then you figure out what fits and what doesn't fit. And that's kind of what the prosecution of James Sullivan was like. It was putting together all these different pieces so that we could make sure that the prosecution of the case was done accurately and with integrity.
What concerned you going into this trial?
He was rich. He was a white male. He had escaped the federal authorities before, and he had two of the best criminal defense attorneys representing him.
They are sharp, and if they can find a way out, they're going to find a way out.
There will not be one shred of physical evidence that links Jim Sullivan to this crime.
Jim has eluded justice so many times that there's a real palpable fear that he's going to get away with it, that he's going to elude justice again.
After nearly 20 years, Jim Sullivan is finally on trial here in Fulton County for the murder of his wife, Lita. For her heartbroken parents, this day couldn't come soon enough.
The pain, believe it or not, it increases. It does not decrease. The shock decreases. The depression decreases. But the pain continues.
It was an A-team of prosecutors, great courtroom performers.
Clint Rucker was the lead prosecutor, and Anna Grain, Kelly Hill, Sheila Ross.
And the evidence will show that the person who sent that hitman to Lita's door is the only person in the world who could have profited from her death. It is the only person in the world who met Tony Harwood and paid him off for killing her, and is the only person in the world who fled halfway around the world to avoid facing you.
Jury was 9 women and 3 men.
The jury is also racially mixed.
Jim Sullivan had Ed Garland and Don Samuel, again, the people who won that big courtroom victory against the feds.
What the state relies on is 2 types of evidence. Circumstantial evidence, and then the testimony of con men.
The state initially started out the nature of the crime and what happened that morning.
I heard 2 sounds. They sounded to me like steel hitting steel.
I just didn't want to believe that it was a gun. And so I hesitated for a second, and then I really knew that it was a gun.
She was able to squeeze my hand each time I spoke with her, like she understood what I was saying. And for many, many years after this, I thought that's all it was. And then one day I realized that she was comforting me more than I was comforting her. That was the sort of lady I felt she was.
They had the phone calls that the FBI had found.
There was a call from this room to Mr. Sullivan's home at 7:44 in the morning.
But all this testimony notwithstanding, it's Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood who everybody wants to hear from.
Belinda Trahan was the most important witness in the case.
He told me that some white guy who wanted to take out his black wife. I didn't believe it.
Why not?
I've been with him for 3 years, over 3 years. I mean, I figured he met someone because we were on the outs.
Most chilling about Belinda's testimony is that she confirms that there was at least one failed attempt on Lita's life.
She testifies that when Tony had gone to Lita's house on January 13th, then she didn't come to the door. They drove back to North Carolina and told Belinda that, you know, it didn't work.
But Belinda testifies that hearing that from her boyfriend left her incredulous.
I said, just don't even lie to me. I said, because anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
Did you in any way mean for that to be a suggestion as to how to get the job accomplished?
No, not at all.
Here's Belinda Trahan, and she is falling on the sword about what she did.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers, and she admitted that on the stand.
You brought in the diner booth where they sat. Why couldn't you just tell the jury and show pictures?
I want you to see the puzzle once it's all put together. Yeah, I can show you the box. I can show you a photograph of it. But when I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Pushed the paper across the table like this, and then Tony put his hand on it and took it from there.
And there was a particular moment when she is asked to stand up in court and identify the person she witnessed give Tony Harwood an envelope full of money.
Please, point him out.
It's right there. He can't even make eye contact.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, James Sullivan.
But if prosecutors feel like Belinda Trahan's testimony is helping their case, they have to know that it's just as big a risk to put Tony Harwood on the stand.
Can you show the jurors the body language Mr. Sullivan used and the tone of voice, if it's possible, that he used when he was explaining to you that his wife, Lita, was a problem?
You know, I've got this wife of mine up in Atlanta, and she is just trying to take everything I've got. And I don't know what to do about it. I need someone to take care of my problem. Do you know anybody that can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
We could prove Tony Harwood and James Sullivan actually met each other. So I spent the first part of Tony Harwood's examination confirming his signature on the hotel receipt.
And the signature, Johnny Kerr.
The fact that he actually went to the flower shop.
Who actually went inside the flower shop to purchase the flowers?
I did.
They had Tony Harwood saying that he was the one who made the collect call to Jim Sullivan's house.
What did you say to him?
I said, Merry Christmas. And he said, I understand. And that was it.
What were you trying to convey to Mr. Sullivan by giving him that signal, those code words?
That his problem was taken care of.
The defense had their chance to cross-examine Harwood. Not a single question. The two key witnesses were, of course, Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood. And so, in closing arguments, the defense assailed their credibility.
You should reject everything that came out of his mouth. Harwood says envelope in the bathroom. She says an envelope at this booth over here.
Garland presents to the jury a letter-sized envelope stuffed with bills. Harwood had said it was all cash in $20 bills.
See, oops, some of it fell out, and some more. It won't fit in an envelope. The whole story just doesn't make sense.
In your closing arguments, you actually brought in a doorbell. Why? What was the point?
I wanted the jurors to have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder.
An ordinary moment.
In an ordinary moment. The second reason why I did it is because James Sullivan liked to read books. And one of his favorite authors wrote a book called For Whom the Bell Tolls.
I'm going to ask you through your verdict of guilty to each and every count to tell James Vincent Sullivan for whom The bell tolls. Tell him that it tolls for thee. For you. For you.
And then I rang the doorbell 3 times.
As the jury goes out to deliberate, I think there's a real fear. Are they going to do it this time, or is it going to be like every other time?
I do not see this as a slam dunk for the state.
There's this anxiety. You're worried, but you're hopeful. I don't care who you talk to that does this kind of work as a litigator. They will tell you, oh, I can look at the jurors and I probably can tell you what they're going to do. No, you don't. You don't.
This is breaking news.
We do have breaking news at this hour. The jury having reached a verdict in the trial of Jim Sullivan.
The jury came back within a few hours on the same day.
It was so silent, and the tension was just palpable.
There's this anxiety. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And you're worried, but you're hopeful.
It's hard not to think of Lita's family, her parents especially, after so many fits and starts to win justice for their firstborn child. It comes down to this moment.
The judge says,
"Ma'am, would you publish the verdict?"
And then from that moment until they get finished, nobody is breathing.
Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, James Vincent Sullivan, guilty of malice murder.
I got a chance to hug Emory McClinton. I had never been hugged so tight before. This was his baby. And we had finally, after 19 years, brought that man a sense of satisfaction. I'll never forget it. The conviction of James Sullivan was the biggest puzzle that I had solved in my career. And it is one that gave me the most satisfaction that I had ever experienced as a prosecutor.
The court hears victim impact statements. What a loss it was to have Lita gone from their lives.
I dream of Lita often. She is smiling and walking in my direction, and I in hers. But we never reach each other.
The jury came back and gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I am so very pleased, and I'm happy. What we were waiting for was something in our judicial system, something to happen and to bring it all together, and that's what you see today.
Why did it take 20 years, do you think?
It goes back to the resources.
He had privilege?
White privilege, completely. He knew how to manipulate people, and he had the resources to do that.
You've got a black victim, you've got a white defendant. Did race hover in this courtroom over this case at all?
I think in our criminal justice system, unfortunately, race always permeates throughout a case. But I'm thankful to say the evidence in the case overcame that racial component.
They never received any money. Is there money? Where is this money?
He's been able to secret his money. For the McClintons, seeing him rot in a prison in South Georgia brings them a whole lot more satisfaction.
This is a woman who you never met, I've never met, most of the people involved in this case never met her, and yet her life really made an impact. When somebody dies in this kind of manner, they don't stop being a member of the family, they don't stop being a member of the community, they never stop mattering.
David Tony Harwood was released from prison in 2018 after serving his 20-year sentence. Jim Sullivan remains behind bars with no possibility of parole.
As for the other two men who were seen at that flower shop, no one else was ever charged. That is our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
Father, a husband, and by all outward appearances, an ordinary man earning and honest. Living. Yet, when detectives began a deep dive into his digital footprint, a much different psychological profile emerged. His search history was filled with explicit queries for older women and escorts, and his device contained numerous recordings of sexual encounters. The contrast between the mild-mannered daytime painter and the nocturnal predator was stark. To secure the final piece of the puzzle, investigators put Carlo under surveillance. When he dined at a restaurant with his wife, detectives retrieved a discarded beverage bottle he had used. The genetic material obtained from the bottle matched the profile found in a bloody handprint on the pillowcase in Nancy's room. Armed with this undeniable evidence, detectives brought Carlo into an interrogation room. Initially, he maintained his ignorance, but as the pressure increased and investigators revealed they possessed his genetic profile, his demeanor crumbled. He began to weep, claiming he had returned to the property late at night to retrieve a ladder and had accidentally run Nancy over with his truck. He claimed he carried her inside to help her, but his story quickly fell apart under close questioning. He ultimately confessed to entering her home with the intent to assault her, hitting her to quiet her, raping her, and then smothering her with a pillow to prevent her from identifying him. He then offered to lead the detectives to her remains. The journey to recover Nancy took investigators deep into the arid, desert-like landscape of the Carrizo Plain, an hour away from Paso Robles. After several incorrect stops in the vast terrain, Carlo pointed to a small, unnatural mound of rocks. There, investigators discovered Nancy's remains, which had been scattered by wildlife. Despite his tears and apparent remorse, Carlo's actions revealed a profound lack of basic human decency, leaving her body exposed to the elements in the wilderness. In January of 2022, rather than face a public trial, Carlo pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with special circumstances, receiving a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Nancy's family, the resolution brought a bittersweet peace. They chose to remember her, not by the tragedy of her final hours, but by the beautiful legacy she left behind, her love for her family, her deep faith, and her passion for riding her horse, Montana, a tradition that her daughter and granddaughter carry on to this day. While the tragedy in Paso Robles was solved through digital footprints left in the quiet wilderness, another complex mystery was unfolding in the high altitude community of Summit County, Utah. Here, the psychological manipulation took a very different and perhaps even more sinister form. In the early morning hours of March 4th, 2022, a 911 call was placed from a residence in the town of Camas. A young mother, Corey Richens, reported that her 39-year-old husband, Eric, was not breathing and felt cold to the touch. Emergency responders arrived to find Eric on his back on the bedroom floor, showing no signs of life. Despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Corey explained to the responding officers that she and Eric had been celebrating a major business success earlier that evening. Corey was a real estate flipper who ran a business called K. Richens Realty, and she had recently contracted to purchase a massive, unfinished mansion in Midway, Utah, for nearly $3 million. She claimed she had prepared a mixed drink for Eric to celebrate, after which she went to sleep in their son's room because the child was having night terrors. When she returned to their bedroom around 3 in the morning, she found him unresponsive. In the immediate aftermath, there was some speculation by an emergency medical technician that Eric might have suffered a brain aneurysm, given a small amount of blood that appeared during chest compressions. This explanation seemed plausible to those who knew Eric as a healthy, athletic man who coached youth soccer and loved hunting. However, the subsequent autopsy conducted by the medical examiner revealed a far more shocking truth. Eric's cause of death was acute drug intoxication, specifically from a massive dose of fentanyl that was 5 times the lethal limit. Crucially, the substance was not medical grade. It was illicitly manufactured street fentanyl. The discovery of a lethal dose of street drugs in a successful, family-oriented businessman who did not use drugs immediately sparked a homicide investigation. As detectives began to dig beneath the surface of the Richens marriage, they found a web of financial instability and deep-seated deception. Corey had grown up in modest circumstances, frequently moving during her childhood. She harbored a powerful ambition to achieve wealth, dreaming of owning the very mansions she had cleaned during her youth. However, her ambition far outpaced her financial reality. Investigators discovered that she was in debt to the tune of more than $4 million, relying on high-interest short-term loans to fund her real estate ventures. To keep her business afloat, Corey had engaged in serious financial deceptions. In 2020, she had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against the family home, which was solely owned by Eric. When Eric discovered this unauthorized loan, the trust in their marriage was permanently fractured. He secretly consulted a divorce attorney and altered his estate plan, creating a trust that named his 3 young sons as the sole beneficiaries and appointing his sister, Katie, as the trustee and executor, effectively cutting Corey out of his personal wealth. As the financial pressure mounted, Eric's health began to fail under highly suspicious circumstances. During a trip to Greece in 2019, Eric became violently ill after drinking a beverage prepared by Corey. He called his sister in a panic, stating he believed his wife was trying to poison him. Later, on Valentine's Day of 2022, just weeks before his death, Corey purchased a toasted bagel sandwich for Eric from a local establishment. After taking a single bite, Eric suffered a severe reaction, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine auto-injector and a heavy dose of allergy medication. He texted a friend later that day, stating that he believed his wife had attempted to poison him again. The breakthrough in the criminal investigation came when detectives analyzed Corey's cellular phone records. They identified frequent communications between Corey and a woman named Carmen Lauber, who worked as a cleaner for Corey's properties. When police executed a search warrant on Carmen's home on unrelated drug charges, they found Eric's obituary taped to a mirror. Faced with severe charges, Carmen agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed that Corey had asked her on 2 separate occasions to obtain strong prescription pain medication, specifically requesting some of that Michael Jackson stuff, which investigators understood to mean powerful synthetic opioids. Carmen admitted to delivering the illicit fentanyl pills to Corey shortly before both the Valentine's Day incident and Eric's fatal overdose. Furthermore, investigators uncovered a secret romantic relationship between Corey and a handyman she had hired, Josh Grossman. The two had exchanged daily highly emotional text messages in which Corey expressed a deep desire to build a life with him, stating in one message that if her husband would just go away, their lives would be perfect. In another message sent less than 48 hours before Eric's death, she urged Josh to hang in until Friday, promising that life would be different. On May 8, 2023, Corey was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. Her behavior following her arrest was a study in narcissistic overconfidence. While in custody, she wrote a children's book about dealing with grief, titled Are You With Me?, and appeared on local television programs to promote it, presenting herself as a grieving, vulnerable widow. However, her attempts to control the narrative extended even into the jail. During a routine search of her cell, corrections officers discovered a 4-page handwritten letter addressed to her mother. The letter instructed her mother to convince her brother to testify falsely that Eric had obtained the fatal drugs during a trip to Mexico. When the case finally went to trial, the prosecution presented a compelling sequence of financial records, testimony from Carmen Lauber, and the emotional testimony of Josh Grossman, who recalled that Corey had once asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service and how it felt. In a stunning legal move, after the prosecution rested its 13-day case, Corey's defense team rested immediately without calling a single witness, confident that the state had not met its burden of proof. The jury of 8 deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a unanimous verdict of guilty on all counts for Eric's family and his 3 young sons, who have since been adopted by Eric's sister. The verdict brought justice. For a dedicated father whose life was cut short by greed. The theme of domestic betrayal and the illusion of the perfect family also lay at the heart of our third case, which took place in the blue-collar city of Evansville, Indiana. On a cold evening in February of 2019, the tight-knit community of first responders was devastated by the murder of Robbie Dorr, a beloved 47-year-old firefighter with 28 years of service. Robbie was a man who lived to help others, often working second jobs to support his family. He had recently married Elizabeth, known to many as Becky, a woman who had been married 5 times previously. Robbie had fallen deeply in love with her, adopting her youngest daughter and striving to provide a stable, comfortable life. However, their short marriage was plagued by financial strain, and Robbie's growing suspicion that Elizabeth was being unfaithful. On the night of February 26th, Robbie arrived home after a grueling 12-hour shift at the fire department. As he pulled into his driveway on Oakley Street, he was ambushed and shot multiple times at close range. Elizabeth called 911, claiming she had been inside preparing dinner when she heard the gunshots and ran out to find her husband bleeding on the ground. Robbie was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The investigation into Robbie's murder was highly personal for the local police, many of whom had worked alongside him for decades. At the crime scene, officers found no spent shell casings, but they recovered a damaged projectile from the roadway. The autopsy revealed that Robbie had been shot with a highly unusual combination of ammunition, including jacketed bullets, lead ball rounds, and plastic shotgun wadding, all fired from a single weapon. Forensic experts identified the firearm as a Taurus Judge, a unique revolver capable of firing both traditional handgun cartridges and shotgun shells. As investigators built their war room, they focused on Elizabeth's cell phone records. They discovered a highly suspicious detail. Elizabeth had deleted a 4-minute and 18-second phone call she received just 5 minutes before Robbie's murder. Through carrier records, detectives traced the deleted call to Larry Richmond Sr., a man with a violent past who had previously served 20 years in prison for a prior murder conviction. Larry Sr. was currently engaged to Elizabeth's sister, Mandy, and lived nearby. When questioned, Elizabeth denied any knowledge of the call and insisted she deleted all her call logs as a matter of habit. However, her oldest son, Nathan, testified that his mother began asking about Robbie's firefighter pension and life insurance policies on the very night of the murder, raising immediate financial motives. The breakthrough came when Larry Richmond Sr.'s son, Larry Jr., contacted investigators. He revealed that his father possessed a cache of hidden firearms and had recently buried a plastic container in the backyard of Mandy's residence. Neighbors' surveillance footage confirmed that Larry Sr. had carried a heavy box into the yard with a shovel late at night. When detectives excavated the yard, they uncovered a collection of handguns though the actual murder weapon was never recovered. However, the search of Larry Sr.'s seized iPhone, which took investigators nearly 8 months to unlock using specialized algorithms, provided crucial location data. The digital evidence placed Larry Sr.'s phone in the immediate vicinity of Robbie's home during the hour leading up to the murder, showing him moving stealthily through the alleyway behind the house. It also confirmed that Elizabeth had called Larry Sr. to inform him of Robbie's expected arrival time, allowing him to wait in the darkness. In October of 2022, Elizabeth Fox Dorr was found guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit murder, receiving a sentence of 90 years in prison. Her co-conspirator, Larry Richmond Sr., was subsequently convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The investigation proved that the pair had conspired to execute Robbie, driven by a desire to be together and to secure his financial benefits. The final case brings us to Huron County, Ohio, and reveals a chilling narrative of control and deception that spanned nearly a quarter of a century. It began on a crisp October night in 2001 when 29-year-old Regina Rowe Hicks disappeared after failing to pick up her 4-year-old son, Montana, from her estranged husband, Paul Hicks. 4 days later, a local farmer noticed something unusual submerged in a deep farm pond on his property. When emergency crews pulled the vehicle from the water, they identified it as Regina's signature white Chevrolet Camaro. Inside, on the passenger side, they discovered Regina's body. The positioning of the body was highly unusual. Her feet were wedged beneath the passenger side console, and the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, indicating that a much larger person had driven the car into the pond and escaped through the open driver's window. The autopsy revealed that Regina had suffered 3 blunt force strikes to her head, which had incapacitated her, but she had ultimately died of drowning, as pond water was found in her lungs. At the time, Paul Hicks was the primary person of interest. The couple was embroiled in a bitter custody battle, and Paul was desperate to avoid paying child support. However, Paul maintained that Regina had simply failed to arrive at the home of his best friend, Steve Gates, where he claimed he was waiting with their son. Without direct physical evidence or eyewitness testimony, the case grew cold, leaving Regina's family, particularly her mother, Losella, to spend decades searching for answers in vain. 14 years later, in 2015, a massive house fire occurred in Goshen, Ohio. The home belonged to Paul Hicks, who had since moved to the area. Paul claimed he was out of town at a hotel for his railroad job when the fire occurred, but his home surveillance system, which miraculously survived inside a fireproof safe, captured the entire event. The footage showed a man and a woman in white protective suits entering the home with gas cans and setting it ablaze. The woman on the tape had long, curly, blonde hair and facial features that Paul immediately identified as belonging to his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he was currently having a custody dispute. Paul also produced records showing his phone had received nearly 100 harassing calls from Kelly's number on the night of the fire. However, a private investigator representing the insurance company, Zach McCune, began to uncover a series of bizarre inconsistencies. Kelly's actual phone records showed she had not made those calls. Further investigation revealed that Paul had used a digital spoofing service to make the calls appear as though they originated from Kelly. Most astoundingly, investigators traced a purchase from a custom novelty website to an IP address associated with Paul. The purchase was for a custom-manufactured rubber mask made from photographs of Kelly's face, along with a blonde wig. Paul had hired an accomplice to wear the mask and wig in front of his own surveillance cameras to frame his ex-girlfriend and collect a massive insurance payout. The exposure of this elaborate arson scheme re-energized the cold case investigation into Regina's murder. Detectives with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation realized that Paul's pattern of using extreme, theatrical deception to control and destroy the women in his life had begun decades earlier. In 2024, investigators approached Paul's former best friend, Steve Gates. Faced with the prospect of being charged as an accessory, Gates agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. He confessed that on the night of Regina's disappearance in 2001, she had indeed arrived at his property. An argument had ensued, during which Paul had struck Regina, rendering her unconscious. Paul then forced Gates to help him transport her in her own car to the secluded pond, where Paul drove the vehicle into the water with Regina inside. In April of 2025, 24 years after Regina's death, Paul Hicks was arrested and subsequently convicted of her murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison. For Regina's family and her son, Montana, who had grown up under the shadow of his mother's mysterious death, the verdict provided a long-delayed truth. These 4 cases, though unique in their geography and execution, offer a profound lesson in criminal psychology. They remind us that the human capacity for deception is vast, but so too is the dedication of those who work to uncover the truth through patience, technology, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The silent voices of the victims are ultimately heard, proving that no secret remains buried forever. The quiet oak-studded hills of Paso Robles, California, present an image of rustic tranquility. Nestled halfway between the bustling metropolises of San Francisco and Los Angeles, this getaway town is defined by its sweeping vineyards, rolling pastures, and ancient trees. Locally, the area is known by its historic Spanish name, El Paso de Robles, which translates simply to the Pass of the Oaks. For generations, people have sought out this landscape for its beauty and its peace. Yet, within the quiet expanse of the countryside, the human mind occasionally harbors dark impulses that shatter the very serenity of the surroundings. In May of 2018, this rural paradise became the backdrop for a baffling disappearance that challenged local law enforcement and deeply shook the tight-knit community. the focus of the mystery was a secluded vacation. Property on El Faro Road, known as Paradise Ranch. The property featuring a grand two-story Victorian home with wraparound porches and a weeping willow tree was owned by 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum. Nancy was a beloved figure in the local community, known for running a popular hair salon downtown called The Strand. She was a woman of deep faith, a devout Jehovah's Witness who lived alone following the death of her husband a few years prior. She was described by those who knew her as exceptionally generous, open, and kind, sharing a unique bond with her daughter, Amanda, who worked alongside her as a stylist. The ranch was not merely Nancy's home. It was a labor of love. She and her late husband, a contractor, had purchased the fixer-upper in 2006, working diligently to transform it into a beautiful vacation rental. Nancy named it Paradise Ranch, a reflection of her spiritual hope for a peaceful world. On Friday, May 4th, 2018, a group of more than 20 wedding guests checked into the ranch for a weekend celebration at a local winery. The bride and her bridesmaids occupied the main house and a nearby guest house, enjoying the idyllic setting and the warm hospitality of Nancy, who welcomed them with open arms. The tranquility of the weekend ended abruptly on Saturday, May 5th. Amanda grew concerned when her mother failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study, an absence that was highly uncharacteristic of the deeply committed woman. Amanda requested that a neighbor check on Nancy. The neighbor arrived to find the door to Nancy's cottage wide open, the television blaring, and no sign of the homeowner. When Amanda arrived, she was met with a chilling scene. Nancy's personal belongings, including her purse, car keys, cellular phone, and electronic tablet, were left untouched on a bench. Her 2 vehicles remained parked outside. However, a closer inspection revealed a dark stain on the carpet, missing bedsheets, and blood spatter on the walls, the headboard, and a beige pillow. Terrified, Amanda contacted emergency services, reporting a missing person under highly suspicious circumstances. The initial response by the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office was immediate and intense. Reserve Detective Clinton Cole, a senior deputy at the time, was dispatched to the property. Walking into the cottage, the lack of forced entry suggested that Nancy may have known her assailant or was caught completely off guard. The presence of significant blood spatter and the missing bedding indicated a violent struggle and a forced abduction. The peaceful vacation rental was instantly transformed into a secured crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape as search dogs, helicopters, and forensic investigators began scouring the area. As the sun began to set on that Saturday evening, a critical discovery was made. Several miles away, an officer with the California Highway Patrol located discarded bedding, a pillow, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt on La Ponza Road, approximately 6 to 7 miles from the ranch. The pattern of the bedding matched the sheets missing from Nancy's cottage and the clothing was confirmed by Amanda to belong to her mother. The presence of blood on these items heightened the urgency of the search. Investigators faced a monumental task. The presence of more than 20 wedding guests on the property presented a large and immediate pool of potential suspects. Each guest had to be systematically interviewed, their movements accounted for, and their cooperation assessed. One particular wedding guest drew temporary suspicion due to ambiguities regarding his whereabouts during the rehearsal dinner on Friday night. When initial telephone interviews proved contentious, detectives traveled to his residence in Northern California to clarify his timeline. The man ultimately proved highly cooperative, presenting photographs that confirmed his presence at the dinner and voluntarily provided a deoxyribonucleic acid sample, completely clearing him of suspicion. Other leads were pursued with equal vigor. Investigators looked into local contractors who had recently performed work on the property to prepare it for a planned sale. A general contractor, Sean Bloom, who had recently been involved in a heated financial dispute with Nancy, was interviewed, although he did not hide his frustration regarding his past dealings with Nancy. He eventually submitted his deoxyribonucleic acid, voluntarily clearing his name. Detectives even examined Nancy's family dynamics, noting a historically strained relationship between Nancy and her son, Chad. Chad had chosen a different path in life, distant from his mother's religious beliefs, and the two had not spoken face to face in several years. However, telephone records revealed they had exchanged text messages on the night of her disappearance. When Chad refused to provide a biological sample, citing concerns over privacy, investigators placed him under surveillance. After observing him discard beverage bottles in public, detectives retrieved the items for testing. The laboratory results ultimately cleared Chad of any involvement. With traditional leads exhausted, the investigation began to stall. The community grew anxious, and the family searched for answers amid the silence of the foothills. It was at this critical juncture that the investigative team decided to employ a sophisticated and relatively novel technology, global positioning system geofencing. By securing a search warrant for Google location data within a virtual boundary around Paradise Ranch during the precise hours of Nancy's disappearance, investigators sought to identify any active mobile devices present at the scene. This digital dragnet proved highly effective. Among the data returned by the search, investigators isolated a specific device identifier that had pinged within Nancy's studio apartment at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning on the night she vanished. The timing aligned perfectly with an interrupted 0-second emergency call recorded on Nancy's telephone bill at 12:17 that night. When investigators traced the subscriber information for the mystery device, the name that emerged was Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo was a local painter who had worked on the ranch's decks and trim in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. During an initial routine sweep of contractors, Carlo had been cooperative and polite, even recounting a pleasant interaction where Nancy had gifted him a tamale. To the community, he appeared to be a dedicated father, a quiet family man, and a skilled craftsman with no prior criminal history in either the United States or Mexico. However, a deeper psychological analysis and an examination of his digital footprint revealed a stark duality. Behind the facade of the courteous laborer lay a troubled individual with a secret life marked by substance abuse, excessive drinking, and a fixation on mature adult entertainment. Detectives initiated discreet surveillance on Carlo. They followed him to a local restaurant where he dined with his wife. When he departed, investigators retrieved a plastic soft drink bottle he had used. The laboratory compared the biological material from the bottle to the deoxyribonucleic acid extracted from the bloody handprint on the pillow in Nancy's cottage. It was an exact match. Armed with conclusive scientific evidence, Reserve Detective Cole and his partner brought Carlo in for interrogation. In the interview room, detectives systematically established his familiarity with the property and his knowledge of Nancy's living arrangements. When confronted with the irrefutable evidence of his presence and his biological profile at the scene, Carlo's demeanor shifted. Visibly, the confidence dissolved, replaced by a confession that began as an attempt to minimize his culpability. Carlo initially claimed that he had returned to the property in the middle of the night to retrieve a ladder for an upcoming job. He alleged that while backing up his truck, he accidentally struck Nancy, who had walked behind the vehicle. He claimed he carried her inside to assist her, and she subsequently collapsed. However, under methodical questioning, the implausibility of his story became apparent. The blood spatter on the walls and headboard did not align with a simple vehicular accident. Eventually, Carlo disclosed the grim reality of that night. He admitted that he had traveled to the ranch with the explicit intent of assaulting Nancy, misinterpreting her past kindness and hospitality as romantic interest. He entered her home, assaulted her, and ultimately suffocated her with a pillow to prevent his crime from being discovered. In a moment of apparent contrition, Carlo offered to guide detectives to her remains. The journey led investigators deep into the arid, desert-like terrain of the Carrizo Plain, approximately an hour east of Paso Robles. In this vast and unforgiving landscape, Carlo pointed out a remote location. There, beneath a small, displaced pile of rocks, investigators discovered Nancy's remains. The recovery brought a somber closure to the search, confirming the worst fears of her family and friends. In January of 2022, rather than facing a highly publicized trial, Carlo opted for a legal proceeding known as a slow plea. The prosecution presented its extensive evidence to a judge, who subsequently found Carlo guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, including rape and burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the legal resolution brought justice, the emotional impact of the loss remained profound. Amanda continued her mother's legacy, finding comfort in their shared love for equestrian trail riding, carrying the memory of Nancy's beautiful spirit beneath the wide California sky. The theme of a deceptive facade, shielding a calculating mind, is not unique to the hills of California. In the scenic mountain community of Summit County, Utah, a similarly complex tragedy unfolded, involving a sudden death, a public display of grief, and a financial house of cards that eventually collapsed under the weight of an intense criminal investigation. Eric Richins was a 39-year-old husband, a dedicated father of 3 young boys, and a successful business owner. He was a man who worked hard and played hard, deeply involved in his children's lives as a soccer coach and an active outdoorsman. Alongside his partner, he ran a highly profitable stonemasonry business, securing an affluent lifestyle for his family. His wife, Corey Richins, was an ambitious woman who had transitioned from working as a cashier to running a successful real estate and home flipping enterprise. To the outside world, they represented the quintessential successful American family, living in a beautiful home and planning major real estate acquisitions. In the early morning hours of March 4th, 2022, Corey contacted emergency services, frantic and distressed. She reported that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. Emergency medical technicians and sheriff's deputies arrived at the residence to find Eric unresponsive on the floor of his bedroom. Despite administration of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Corey explained to investigators that they had been celebrating a major business success earlier that evening, specifically the impending purchase of a multi-million-dollar mansion in Midway, Utah. She stated that she had prepared a mixed drink for Eric before going to sleep in her son's bedroom to comfort him during a night terror. Upon returning to her bedroom in the early hours of the morning, she claimed she found her husband lifeless. The sudden death of a seemingly healthy, athletic young man immediately prompted a forensic autopsy. While initial observations on the scene by some first responders led to speculation of a medical event such as an aneurysm, the toxicology results told a far more sinister story. The medical examiner determined that Eric's cause of death was acute drug intoxication, specifically from a massive dose of illicit fentanyl. The concentration in his system was calculated to be 5 times the lethal limit. Notably, the substance was identified as illicitly manufactured, street-grade fentanyl, rather than a pharmaceutical preparation. The revelation of an overdose sparked a comprehensive criminal investigation. Eric had no history of substance abuse, and those close to him were adamant that he would never knowingly ingest such a substance. As investigators began to probe the couple's lives, they uncovered a dark undercurrent of financial distress and marital discord that contrasted sharply with their public image. Financial records revealed that Corey was embroiled in a severe financial crisis. Her real estate business was highly leveraged, funded by high-interest, short-term loans. She owed millions of dollars to various lenders and was desperate for capital to finalize the purchase of the Midway Mansion, a project she hoped would solidify her status among the wealthy elite of Park City. Investigators discovered that in 2020, Corey had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against the family home, which was solely owned by Eric, forging his signature on the documents. When Eric discovered the deception, it caused a severe rift in the marriage. He consulted a divorce attorney and quietly altered his estate plan, creating a new trust that named his children as beneficiaries and his sister, Katie, as the trustee and executor, effectively removing Corey from control of his assets. The tension between the couple was further highlighted by incidents prior to Eric's death. Family and friends recounted that Eric had fallen violently ill on multiple occasions after consuming food or drinks prepared by Corey. During a trip to Greece in 2019, Eric became severely ill after drinking a beverage his wife handed him, leading him to express concerns to his sister that Corey was attempting to poison him. On Valentine's Day in 2022, just weeks before his death, Eric suffered a severe systemic reaction after eating a sandwich purchased by Corey, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine autoinjector and a significant dose of antihistamines. He texted a friend afterward, stating that he believed his wife was trying to kill him. In the wake of Eric's death, Corey's behavior drew further scrutiny. 2 days after his passing, a confrontation occurred at the home when Corey attempted to access a safe containing Eric's will, only to be informed by his sister that she had been cut out of the estate. The dispute escalated to physical violence, resulting in Corey being charged with assault. Despite the mounting tension and the active investigation into her husband's suspicious death, Corey proceeded to self-publish a children's book on grief, titled Are You With Me? The book, designed to help children cope with the loss of a parent, was dedicated to Eric and featured drawings of the family. Corey embarked on a public relations campaign, appearing on local television and radio programs to promote the book, portraying herself as a grieving widow navigating the difficult path of single motherhood. The turning point in the criminal investigation came when detectives, assisted by a private investigator hired by the Richens family, focused on Corey's communication records. They identified frequent contact between Corey and a house cleaner named Carmen Lauber, who had a history of drug-related offenses. Under questioning, and in exchange for use immunity, Carmen confessed that she had procured illicit fentanyl pills for Corey on 2 separate occasions in the weeks leading up to Eric's death. Cell phone data confirmed that these drug transactions occurred in close proximity to the dates of Eric's sudden illnesses, including the Valentine's Day incident and his ultimate death on March 4th. Furthermore, investigators uncovered evidence of a long-standing extramarital affair between Corey and a handyman named Josh Grossman. Text messages exchanged between the two revealed a deep emotional connection and a shared desire for a future together, with Corey expressing a wish that her husband would simply go away so they could realize their dream of living together at the Midway Mansion. In May of 2023, Corey was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple drug-related offenses, while in custody awaiting trial. A search of her jail cell revealed a handwritten letter addressed to her mother, containing instructions for her brother to fabricate testimony claiming that Eric had obtained illicit drugs from Mexico. The prosecution utilized this letter as powerful evidence of witness tampering and consciousness of guilt. The trial, which took place in a Summit County courtroom, was a highly charged event. The prosecution systematically presented a wealth of circumstantial and digital evidence detailing Corey's financial desperation, her secret purchases of fentanyl, her affair, and the toxicological findings. The state's witnesses included Eric's sister, his friends, and Carmen Lauber, who detailed the drug purchases. The defense sought to portray Eric's death as an accidental overdose, highlighting the lack of direct forensic evidence linking Corey to the administration of the pills. However, in a stunning tactical decision, the defense rested its case without calling any witnesses or presenting any evidence of their own. Following a brief deliberation of less than 3 hours, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding Corey Richens guilty of aggravated murder and the remaining charges. The conviction brought a profound sense of justice to Eric's family, though the tragedy left 3 young boys without a father and with their mother facing a lifetime behind bars. The case stood as a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences of greed and deception. A similar pattern of domestic betrayal and calculated violence emerged in Evansville, Indiana, where a respected member of the community was ambushed in his own driveway, sparking an investigation that exposed a web of infidelity, financial greed, and a complex conspiracy. Robert "Robbie" Dorr was a veteran firefighter, a man who had dedicated 28 years of his life to protecting the citizens of Evansville. He was a leader within the department, a mentor to younger firefighters, and a hero who had once rescued a child from a burning building. To support his family, Robbie worked multiple jobs, including a management position at a local restaurant, where he met Elizabeth "Becky" Fox. The two fell in love and were married in a beautiful beach ceremony. For Robbie, Becky represented the opportunity for a stable, happy family life, and he welcomed her children into his heart. However, the marriage was fraught with underlying tension. Robbie, who had experienced infidelity in a previous relationship, began to harbor suspicions about Becky's fidelity, noting that she was possessive of her cellular phone and frequently deleted her text messages and call history. Financial difficulties also strained the relationship. Despite Robbie's tireless work ethic, the family's expenditures, including new vehicles and household furnishings, outpaced their income, leading to significant debt. On the evening of February 26, 2019, Robbie arrived home after completing a 12-hour shift. As he parked his truck in the driveway of his Oakley Street home, he was ambushed and shot multiple times at close range. Neighbors reported hearing a series of rapid gunshots, and Becky contacted 911, reporting that she had heard popping sounds while cooking dinner and found her husband bleeding on the ground. Emergency responders, including Robbie's fellow firefighters, rushed to the scene. Despite efforts to save him, Robbie succumbed to his wounds. The loss of a beloved firefighter sent shockwaves through the community, and a massive police presence secured the area, initiating a rigorous homicide investigation. The initial examination of the crime scene yielded a critical clue: the absence of spent shell casings. However, a fired projectile recovered from the street, along with unique ammunition components extracted from Robbie's body during the autopsy, indicated that he had been shot with a weapon capable of firing both traditional bullets and shotgun shells. This distinctive combination pointed directly to a specific firearm known as a Taurus judge. Investigators discovered that a Taurus judge had recently been reported stolen from a local pawn shop. The investigation into the theft revealed that an employee of the pawn shop, Larry Richmond Jr., had access to the inventory. Further inquiries into the Richmond family exposed a highly complex connection to the Dorr household. Larry Richmond Jr.'s father, Larry Richmond Sr., was a convicted murderer who was currently on probation. Larry Sr. was in a romantic relationship with Becky's sister, Mandy, and the couple lived near the Dorr residence. However, telephone records and witness statements revealed a far more scandalous reality. Larry Sr. was secretly engaged in a romantic affair with Becky. The two had been exchanging frequent communications, which Becky had systematically deleted from her mobile device. A detailed forensic analysis of the cellular phone records managed by the local high-tech crime unit proved to be the key to breaking the case. Investigators recovered data showing a 4-minute telephone call between Becky and Larry Sr. that occurred mere minutes before Robbie's murder. Becky had deleted this call from her device log, but it remained recorded on the service provider's network. When confronted with this discrepancy during a police interview, Becky's attempts to deny the communication crumbled, and she eventually admitted to speaking with Larry Sr., claiming she sought to hide the relationship from her husband and the police. As detectives deepened their focus on Larry Sr., they secured surveillance footage from a neighboring property showing him carrying a plastic container into the backyard of his residence and burying it in the ground. A search of the property led to the recovery of a buried cache of handguns, though the actual murder weapon was not among them. Additionally, an inmate who had shared a cell with Larry Sr. in jail came forward, reporting that Larry Sr. had confessed to the murder, stating that he and Becky had planned to eliminate Robbie to secure his firefighter pension and estate. In due course, both Becky and Larry Sr. were arrested and charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Becky's trial proceeded first, with the prosecution presenting a compelling circumstantial case that detailed the secret affair, the deleted telephone calls, the financial motive regarding Robbie's pension, and the coordinated movements of Larry Sr. on the night of the crime. Despite the defense's arguments that there was no direct evidence linking Becky to the planning of the murder, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. She was subsequently sentenced to 90 years in prison. Larry Sr.'s trial followed, with Mandy testifying honestly regarding his movements and the inconsistencies in his alibi. The jury deliberated for several hours before finding him guilty of murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison without parole. The resolution of the cases brought a somber sense of justice to Robbie's family and his fellow firefighters, who honored his memory by dedicating a new fire engine in his name, ensuring his legacy of service would endure. The final case in this exploration of deception and justice spans decades and involves an extraordinary level of criminal calculation, a cold case murder, and an elaborate frame-up attempt that ultimately exposed a killer who believed he was beyond the reach of the law. The story began in Goshen, Ohio, in June of 2015 with a massive house fire that destroyed an investment property owned by a railroad foreman named Paul Hicks. The fire, which occurred in the middle of the night, was quickly determined by arson investigators to be incendiary, with multiple gas cans discovered inside the home. Surveillance footage from a highly secure system within the house captured two individuals dressed in protective suits entering the home, pouring gasoline, and igniting the fire. Paul Hicks immediately pointed the finger at his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he was embroiled in a bitter child custody dispute. He presented investigators with cell phone records showing that Kelly had allegedly called his phone over 90 times on the night of the fire, and he provided previous surveillance footage showing a woman resembling Kelly damaging a hot tub on his property. Based on this evidence, Kelly was arrested and faced significant legal peril. However, the investigation took an unexpected turn when civil attorneys representing the insurance company began to scrutinize the evidence. A detailed examination of the telephone records revealed a major discrepancy. While Paul's phone showed numerous incoming calls from Kelly's number, Kelly's actual service provider records indicated she had made no such calls. This discovery pointed to the use of a voice spoofing application designed to manipulate caller identification. Further investigation traced the Internet Protocol address used to place the spoofed calls to a mobile device associated with Paul Hicks himself. Detectives also uncovered financial records showing a purchase made under the name of another woman associated with Paul, a custom-made photorealistic mask of Kelly's face from a specialty website, along with a blonde wig matching her unique hairstyle. The evidence suggested that Paul had orchestrated the entire arson, hiring accomplices to wear the mask and wig on camera to frame Kelly and secure a substantial insurance payout while simultaneously gaining an advantage in their custody battle. While the arson investigation exposed Paul's elaborate deception, it also revived interest in a much darker chapter of his past. Investigators in Huron County, Ohio, had long suspected Paul in the unsolved death of his first wife, Regina Roe Hicks, in October of 2001. Regina was a vibrant young mother who had recently filed for divorce from Paul, seeking independence and custody of their young son, Montana. Shortly after receiving a significant insurance payout from a suspicious house fire at their residence, Regina purchased a distinctive white Camaro. She was preparing to build a new life when she suddenly disappeared on an evening when she was scheduled to pick up her son from Paul. 4 days after her disappearance, a local farmer discovered Regina's white Camaro submerged in a deep pond on his property. Inside the vehicle, investigators recovered Regina's body on the passenger side. While there were no obvious signs of lethal trauma, the autopsy revealed that she had suffered 3 blunt force blows to her scalp, sufficient to stun or render her unconscious, and that she was alive when the vehicle entered the water, ultimately dying from drowning. The positioning of her body, with her feet tucked beneath the passenger console, and the driver's seat pushed back to accommodate a much larger individual, strongly indicated that someone else had driven the vehicle into the pond and escaped through the open driver's window. Paul Hicks was the primary suspect, but with no direct forensic evidence or eyewitness testimony, the case went cold for over a decade. The breakthrough came through the efforts of a local podcaster, Ashley Ford, who began a detailed investigation into the cold case, generating renewed public interest and prompting the Bureau of Criminal Investigation to review the files. Investigators focused on Steve Gates, Paul's close friend who had provided an alibi for him on the night of Regina's disappearance. Under intense questioning and offered use immunity, Steve Gates finally broke his 24-year silence. He confessed that on the night of the murder, Regina had arrived at his property to pick up her son and became involved in a violent argument with Paul. Gates stated that he later discovered Regina's lifeless body in the passenger seat of her Camaro and that Paul had threatened him into cooperating. Gates admitted that he followed Paul as he drove the Camaro to the pond and submerged it, leaving Regina to drown. With this crucial testimony, Paul Hicks was arrested and charged with the murder and kidnapping of Regina. The trial, held in a Huron County courtroom, featured emotional testimony from Regina's family, her former friends, and Steve Gates, who detailed the grim events of that night. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge Gates' credibility and highlight the lack of physical evidence, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Paul Hicks was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, bringing a long-awaited resolution to a family that had suffered for nearly a quarter of a century. The conviction stood as a testament to the persistence of the investigators and the power of truth to dismantle even the most complex webs of deception. The passage of the Oaks. It is often difficult to speak of the day when everything changed, because when those who survived look back, their minds are immediately filled with the heavy fog of tragedy. The quiet beauty of Paso Robles, California, has long been a sanctuary for those seeking a slower pace of life. The real name of this region is El Paso de Robles, which translates to the Pass of the Oaks. It is a fairy tale landscape of rolling hills, ancient oak trees, majestic horses, cattle, grazing on golden pastures, and lush vineyards stretching toward the horizon. It is halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles, a getaway town that promises peace. Yet, down a secluded path known as El Faro Road, in the middle of all this natural splendor, something remarkably dark and calculated took place. The setting of this mystery was a beautiful ranch-style property known to locals as Paradise Ranch. Its owner was Nancy Woodrum, a 62-year-old woman who lived alone after her husband passed away a few years prior. Nancy was a cherished fixture in the Paso Robles community, operating a popular hair salon downtown called The Strand. She was a woman who possessed a rare and generous gift of openness, kindness, and warmth. Her clients did not merely visit her for her professional talent, which many described as magic, but for the profound sense of comfort she provided. Nancy shared a deep and special bond with her daughter, Amanda, who worked alongside her as a stylist, carrying on the family tradition. Nancy was also a devout Jehovah's Witness, a woman of strong faith, who lived her life with high moral principles. She loved being out in nature with her horses, finding a unique sense of calm in the quiet companionship of her animals. Nancy and her late husband, Robert, had purchased the property on El Faro Road in the year 2006. It was originally a fixer-upper, a labor of love that they transformed through years of hard work. Robert was a contractor, and together they turned the estate into a breathtaking vacation rental. Guests arriving at the property would be greeted by a towering two-story Victorian home with wraparound porches and a massive weeping willow tree. Nancy named it Paradise Ranch because it reflected her deeply held biblical hope of a future paradise on earth. On Friday, the 4th of May, in the year 2018, a large group of wedding guests checked into Paradise Ranch. They were preparing for a beautiful weekend wedding at a local winery. The bride, who had selected the venue online, found the main house to be charming, large, and welcoming. Nancy met the bridal party shortly after their arrival, introducing herself with her customary warmth, offering hugs, and explaining that she would be staying in a smaller, adjacent cottage on the property. The weekend proceeded as planned, filled with the joy and anticipation of the upcoming nuptials. However, on Saturday, the 5th of May, the atmosphere of celebration shattered. Amanda received a phone call from a member of her mother's congregation. Nancy had failed to show up for a scheduled Bible study, an absence that was entirely unprecedented for a woman of her devotion. Deeply concerned, Amanda asked a neighbor to check on her mother. The neighbor arrived at the cottage and found a scene that was instantly chilling. The front door was wide open. The television was blaring at a high volume, and there was no sign of Nancy. When Amanda arrived and approached the cottage, her anxiety turned to absolute panic. Everything inside appeared exactly as Nancy had left it, yet she was gone. A closer inspection revealed a dark stain on the carpet. The sheets and bedding from her bed were entirely missing. On the walls and the headboard, there appeared to be a fine pattern of blood spatter. Amanda immediately called 911. The dispatcher received the call from a frantic family member reporting a missing person. When the first responding deputies arrived, they recognized that the cottage was not merely a site of a disappearance, but an active crime scene. The entire property was quickly taped off. Investigators faced an incredibly complex situation. There were 20-plus wedding guests staying in the main house, all of whom had had ready access to the property. In the eyes of the law, every individual present was a potential suspect. As the police began their search, an eagle-eyed officer made a discovery that would fundamentally alter the course of the investigation. Clinton Cole, a reserve detective with the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, was called to assist. Upon arriving at the secluded property, Cole met with senior investigators who confirmed that the circumstances were highly suspicious. Entering the cottage, Cole observed the open door and the total absence of forced entry. On the floor lay 2 large bloodstains. On a nearby bench sat Nancy's purse, her car keys, her cellular phone, and her tablet. Her 2 vehicles remained parked outside. The presence of her personal belongings and her vehicles strongly indicated that she had not left of her own free will. While forensic technicians processed the cottage, a crucial call came from an officer with the California Highway Patrol, approximately 6 to 7 miles away. On a secluded stretch of road known as La Ponza Road, the officer had discovered a pile of discarded bedding and clothing. The items included a pillow, a gingham print sheet, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. The gingham print of the sheet matched the remaining bedding in Nancy's cottage. Amanda later confirmed that the clothing belonged to her mother. The discovery of these items on a roadside suggested a grim scenario. Nancy had been wrapped in her own bedding and transported away from the property, either severely injured or deceased. With this discovery, the pool of potential suspects grew overwhelmingly large. Investigators had to consider whether one of the 24 wedding guests, who had returned to the property after a night of celebrating, was involved. The remote nature of Paradise Ranch meant that an outside intruder was less likely, making the guests the most logical place to start. Meticulous interviews were conducted with every person staying on the estate. During the canvass, Detective Cole noticed 2 fresh tire tracks in the driveway near the cottage, along with scuffle marks in the dirt, suggesting a physical struggle had occurred outside. Inside the bedroom, forensic investigator Janine analyzed the blood spatter by climbing a ladder and looking directly down at a bloody pillow left on the bed. She discovered a faint, partial handprint. One side of the pillow was saturated with blood, while the other side bore the distinct impression of a hand, suggesting the pillow may have been used as a weapon to suffocate or restrain the victim. Forensic technicians swabbed the handprint for DNA, sending the sample to a laboratory for urgent analysis. As investigators worked to clear the wedding guests, one individual drew their attention. This guest could not initially account for his exact whereabouts. During the rehearsal dinner on Friday night, when questioned, he became uncooperative and defensive, which immediately raised red flags for the detectives. Seeking to resolve the discrepancy, investigators traveled to his residence in Northern California for a third interview. This time, the guest was cooperative, explaining his previous defensiveness as stress. His wife provided photographs from her phone showing him at the rehearsal dinner at the exact time of Nancy's disappearance. The guest voluntarily provided a DNA sample, which ultimately cleared him of any involvement. With the wedding guests systematically ruled out, investigators turned their attention to other individuals who had access to Paradise Ranch. Nancy had recently decided to sell the property to dedicate herself to full-time missionary work, and several contractors, painters, and plumbers had been performing repairs on the estate. Among the names discovered in Nancy's personal notes was a painter named Carlo Fuentes Flores. When contacted by phone, Carlo was highly cooperative and friendly, stating he had noticed nothing unusual during his time working at the house, even recalling that Nancy had kindly given him food to show her appreciation for his hard work. Another lead emerged involving a general contractor named Sean Bloom, who had recently been fired by Nancy after a contentious dispute over payments. According to family members, the relationship had become heated, with the contractor threatening legal action. Investigators brought him in for questioning. While he made no secret of his dislike for Nancy, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample voluntarily. The laboratory confirmed that his DNA did not match the profile found on the bloody pillow. The investigation began to stall as weeks passed without a breakthrough. In their search for answers, detectives examined Nancy's family dynamics. They discovered she had a strained relationship with her son, Chad. The two had not spoken face to face in 5 years, largely due to differences regarding their faith. Chad was known to harbor anger and was initially resistant to cooperating with the police, refusing to provide a DNA sample due to personal distrust of law enforcement. Detectives placed him under surveillance, eventually recovering several discarded beer bottles from his vehicle after he was stopped for a traffic violation. Forensic testing of the DNA on the bottles cleared Chad of any connection to the crime. Desperate for a new lead, the sheriff's office decided to utilize a novel investigative tool that had rarely been used in the state of California at the time: a Google geofence warrant, by establishing a virtual boundary around Paradise Ranch and requesting location data from Google for the specific time frame surrounding the crime. Investigators hoped to identify any cellular devices present on the property. Because of the interrupted 911 call placed from Nancy's phone at midnight 17 on the night of her disappearance, investigators had a precise window of time to analyze. When Google returned the geofence data, detectives began the painstaking process of filtering out the known devices belonging to the wedding guests. Deep within the data, they discovered a single, anonymous device pinging directly inside Nancy's studio apartment at 1:30, 3 and 1:52 in the morning. The device was identified by a unique identification number assigned by Google. Investigators secured a subscriber warrant to reveal the owner of the account. In November, the results arrived. The device belonged to Carlo Fuentes Flores, the cooperative painter. The discovery came as a profound shock to investigators. The mild-mannered, family man who had shown such warmth during his initial interview was now placed directly inside the victim's residence at the exact hour of her abduction. There was no plausible professional explanation for a painter to be inside Nancy's private cottage in the middle of the night. Detectives began a comprehensive background check on Carlo. To the public, he was a dedicated husband and father who had lived a quiet, law-abiding life in both Mexico and the United States, with no prior criminal record. However, as investigators executed a search warrant for his digital history, a vastly different persona emerged. His search queries revealed a deep preoccupation with specific adult content, particularly involving older women, which aligned with the age difference between himself and Nancy. Further examination of his phone revealed multiple self-shot recordings of him engaging with various women, exposing a secretive lifestyle characterized by excessive drinking and infidelity. To secure an arrest, investigators needed physical evidence linking Carlo to the crime scene. They initiated surveillance, following him to a local restaurant, where he dined with his wife. When he departed, detectives retrieved the plastic soda bottle he had used. The laboratory extracted his DNA from the bottle and compared it to the profile obtained from the bloody handprint on the pillow. It was a perfect match. Armed with this scientific certainty, Detectives Cole and Dave brought Carlo into an interrogation room. They began the interview gently, asking him about his work at Paradise Ranch and established his familiarity with the layout of the property. Carlo initially maintained his innocence, claiming he had no knowledge of Nancy's fate. As the pressure mounted, investigators revealed the existence of the DNA evidence and the digital tracking. The psychological weight of his deception collapsed. Carlo's demeanor changed visibly, and he confessed initially, attempting to minimize his actions by claiming he had accidentally struck Nancy with his truck while retrieving a ladder in the dark. He claimed he carried her inside the cottage to help her, where she subsequently passed away. Detectives pushed past this fabrication, questioning him about the sexual assault and the blood spatter inside the room. Carlo finally admitted to the truth. He had entered her home with the intent to assault her. When she resisted and attempted to call for help, he assaulted her and subsequently suffocated her with the pillow to prevent his crime from being discovered. In a stunning moment, Carlo offered to lead the detectives to Nancy's remains. They traveled for over an hour into the remote, barren landscape of the Carrizo Plain. After searching several locations, Carlo pointed toward a small, unnatural circle of stones in the dry grass. There, investigators discovered Nancy's remains, which had been ravaged by wild animals. Carlo wept, expressing remorse and asking the detectives to tell his young daughter that he had made a terrible mistake. Following his formal arrest, Carlo wrote a letter of apology to Nancy's family. To avoid the publicity of a lengthy trial, he entered a slow plea, allowing the prosecution to present their evidence directly to the judge. The court found him guilty of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of rape, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though the legal process reached its conclusion, the pain of Nancy's loss remained deeply felt by her family and the community. Amanda continues to honor her mother's memory, finding comfort in their shared love of horseback riding and their faith, knowing that the beautiful spirit of Nancy Woodrum left an indelible mark on all who knew her. The illusion of grief. In the serene, snow-capped mountains of Summit County, Utah, the town of Park City and its surrounding valleys represent the pinnacle of quiet luxury. It is a region where successful professionals build beautiful estates, seek outdoor adventures, and raise their families in what appears to be an idyllic environment. But in the early morning hours of the 3rd of March in the year 2022, this tranquil community became the center of a baffling mystery that would expose a profound divide between outward appearances and a dark, hidden reality. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, a frantic call was placed to 911. The caller was Corey Richens, a 39-year-old local real estate agent and mother of 3 young boys. She reported that her husband, Eric Richens, was cold to the touch and not breathing. Emergency responders arrived quickly at the family's beautiful home, where they found Eric lying unresponsive on the bedroom floor. Despite their immediate efforts to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation, Eric was pronounced dead at the scene. In the initial hours following the tragedy, investigators began the standard process of gathering information. Corey explained that she and Eric had been celebrating a highly successful business transaction earlier that evening. She had recently secured the purchase of a massive, unfinished estate in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million, which she intended to renovate and flip for a substantial profit. To mark the occasion, Corey stated she had prepared a mixed drink for Eric before retiring to sleep in one of their children's bedrooms to comfort a son experiencing night terrors. When she returned to their master bedroom hours later, she claimed she found Eric cold and unresponsive. To the community and the media, Corey presented the portrait of a deeply bereaved young widow. In the months that followed, she channeled her grief into a creative project, self-publishing a children's book titled Are You With Me? The book was designed to help young children cope with the sudden loss of a parent, written from the perspective of a child wondering if they're deceased. father was still present in their daily lives. Corey dedicated the book to her late husband, promoting it on local television and radio stations as a tool for healing. Her apparent vulnerability and devotion to her 3 young sons touched the hearts of many viewers. However, behind this public display of maternal care and grieving affection, a meticulous forensic investigation was underway. The state medical examiner conducted an autopsy on Eric Richens, expecting to find evidence of a natural ailment, such as an aneurysm or a heart condition, given his young age and athletic lifestyle. Instead, the toxicology report revealed a shocking truth. Eric had died from acute drug intoxication caused by an extraordinary dose of illicit fentanyl. The concentration of the drug in his system was determined to be more than 5 times the lethal limit. Furthermore, the examiner noted that the substance was not medical-grade pharmaceutical fentanyl, but rather the illicitly manufactured variety typically distributed by illegal drug cartels. This forensic discovery immediately transformed a tragic death into an active homicide investigation. Detectives from the Summit County Sheriff's Office began to look closely at the couple's personal and financial lives. What they uncovered was a complex web of financial instability, deception, and marital discord. Eric Richens was a highly successful stonemason who owned a thriving business called C&E Masonry. He was a dedicated father who worked tirelessly to provide a comfortable life for his family, but he was also a prudent man who valued financial security. In contrast, Corey possessed an insatiable ambition for rapid expansion in the real estate market. Investigators discovered that she had accumulated massive amounts of debt, utilizing high-interest short-term loans to fund her numerous renovation projects. The financial strain had created a severe rift in their marriage. In the year 2020, Eric discovered that Corey had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against their family home, which he solely owned. She had forged his signature on the financial documents to secure the funds. Deeply shaken by this betrayal of trust, Eric consulted with a divorce attorney and privately altered his estate planning. He created a new trust, explicitly removing Corey as a beneficiary and designating his 3 sons as the sole heirs to his estate. He appointed his sister, Katie, as the trustee and executor, ensuring that his business and assets would be protected for his children in the event of his death. When Corey discovered the existence of this new estate plan shortly after Eric's passing, her reaction was far from that of a grieving spouse. A bitter dispute erupted at the family home when she attempted to hire a locksmith to force entry into Eric's private safe to retrieve his will. Eric's sister, Amy, intervened, leading to a physical altercation in which Corey allegedly assaulted her. Corey was subsequently arrested and charged with misdemeanor assault, establishing a clear and immediate hostility between the widow and Eric's protective family. As detectives dug deeper, they began to investigate how a healthy man with no history of illicit drug use could have ingested a massive dose of fentanyl. They discovered that Eric had expressed deep concerns about his safety in the years and months leading up to his death during a vacation to Greece in the year 2019. Eric had become violently ill after drinking a beverage prepared for him, calling his sister to express his fear that Corey had attempted to poison him. More recently, on Valentine's Day in the year 2022, Corey had purchased a breakfast sandwich for Eric from a local bagel shop. Shortly after taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric suffered a severe physical reaction, requiring him to use his son's emergency epinephrine injector and take large doses of antihistamines before falling into a deep sleep. He texted a close friend later that day, stating that he believed his wife had tried to poison him and that he was fortunate to have survived. To trace the source of the lethal drug, investigators utilized digital forensics to analyze Corey's communication records. They discovered that she had been in frequent contact with a woman named Carmen Lauber, who had previously worked for Corey's real estate business as a cleaning specialist. Carmen possessed a history of drug-related offenses. Detectives executed a search warrant at Carmen's residence, discovering drug paraphernalia and establishing probable cause to secure her cooperation. Facing the prospect of significant prison time, Carmen agreed to speak honestly with investigators. She revealed that Corey had approached her on multiple occasions, requesting that she procure strong pain medication for an investor who was allegedly suffering from a back injury. Carmen admitted that she had purchased illicit fentanyl pills from a local dealer and delivered them directly to Corey. In the weeks preceding Eric's death, she further disclosed that after the initial delivery, Corey had requested even stronger pills, which were delivered shortly before the fatal night. As the financial evidence mounted, investigators revealed that Corey's debts had reached over $4 million, and she had expected to receive millions in life insurance benefits upon Eric's death. She had also taken out multiple life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge, providing a clear and powerful financial motive for his murder. In May of the year 2023, Corey Richens was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances with the intent to distribute. She was held without bail in the Summit County Jail. While awaiting trial, Corey's actions continued to draw the attention of authorities. During a routine search of her jail cell, deputies discovered a handwritten 4-page document that prosecutors described as a blatant attempt at witness tampering. The letter, directed to her mother, instructed her brother to fabricate testimony claiming that Eric had obtained fentanyl from agricultural workers during a trip to Mexico. This discovery further solidified the prosecution's case, demonstrating a clear consciousness of guilt. In the spring of the year 2024, the prosecution amended the charges to include attempted murder in connection with the Valentine's Day sandwich incident. They also uncovered evidence of a secretive, years-long romantic affair between Corey and a local handyman named Josh Grossman, revealing a personal motive to escape the marriage and start a new life with. Eric's wealth. Corey's high-profile murder trial began in a packed courtroom in Utah. The prosecution presented a devastating narrative, utilizing the testimony of forensic experts, financial analysts, Carmen Lauber, and Eric's family. A particularly emotional moment occurred when Josh Grossman took the stand, weeping as he confirmed the romantic nature of their relationship and recalled a chilling conversation after Eric's death in which Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service. In a dramatic turn of events, after the prosecution rested its 13-day case, Corey's newly appointed defense team chose to rest their case immediately, without calling a single witness or presenting any evidence. They argued that the state had failed to meet its burden of proof, but the jury was unconvinced. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, the 8-member jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding Corey Richins guilty of aggravated murder and all remaining charges. For the family of Eric Richins, the verdict brought a profound sense of justice and closure, ensuring that the man who lived his life with integrity and loved his children deeply would be remembered as a true father, while the carefully constructed illusion of his grieving widow was forever shattered. The ambush on Oakley Street. Evansville, Indiana, is a tight-knit city where neighbors watch out for one another, and the members of the local fire department are regarded as heroes. In this community, Robert "Robbie" Dorr was a towering figure, a veteran firefighter. Of 28 years, Robbie was known for his exceptional bravery, his leadership, and his dedication to training the next generation of first responders. He was a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to the service of others, working multiple jobs to ensure his family was well provided for. On a cold night in February, in the year 2019, Robbie arrived home after completing a grueling 12-hour shift at the fire department. As he pulled his truck into the driveway of his residence on Oakley Street, the peaceful neighborhood was suddenly shattered by the sound of 5 rapid gunshots. Neighbors, startled by the noise, immediately called 911. Moments later, a second call came from inside the residence. Robbie's wife, Becky Dorr, reported that her husband had been shot in the driveway. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, finding Robbie lying on the concrete with critical injuries. Despite their desperate efforts to perform life-saving measures, the beloved firefighter was pronounced dead. The news of Robbie's death sent shockwaves through the city of Evansville. His fellow firefighters arrived at the scene in a state of profound grief and disbelief, escorting his body to the coroner's office in a solemn procession of fire engines. Robbie was a man who appeared to have no enemies, leaving investigators with a baffling mystery from the very beginning. Detectives from the Evansville Police Department began a comprehensive investigation. An initial search of the crime scene revealed a highly unusual detail. There were no spent shell casings left in the driveway. However, forensic technicians discovered a single-fired projectile embedded in the road. The breakthrough in the physical evidence came during the autopsy. The forensic pathologist recovered several projectiles from Robbie's body, revealing a highly unusual mixture of ammunition, including jacketed bullets, lead ball, projectiles, and plastic wadding. A firearms expert analyzed this evidence and determined that the weapon used in the murder was a very specific and powerful revolver known as a Taurus Judge, which is designed to fire both traditional handgun ammunition and shotgun shells from the same cylinder. Armed with this unique piece of information, investigators began to search for any local records of stolen or purchased Taurus Judge revolvers. They discovered that such a weapon had recently been stolen from a local pawn shop. The investigation quickly focused on a young employee of the shop, Larry Richmond, Jr., who had access to the inventory. As detectives looked into the young man's background, they discovered a connection that would lead them directly to the heart of the conspiracy. Larry Jr.'s father, Larry Richmond Sr., was a convicted felon who is currently on probation for a previous murder conviction from his youth. More significantly, Larry Sr. was in a romantic relationship with Becky Doerr's sister, Mandy. The investigators established a war room, mapping out the relationships between the victim, his family, and the suspect pool. They discovered that Robbie and Becky's marriage, which had lasted only 6 months, was marked by severe financial strain and suspicion. Robbie had expressed deep insecurities regarding Becky's faithfulness, noting that she frequently deleted her text messages and kept her phone hidden from him. He had compiled a mounting debt to fund a luxurious lifestyle for Becky, who was not working at the time. Following Robbie's funeral, which was attended by hundreds of grieving community members, detectives brought several key individuals in for questioning, including Becky, her sister Mandy, and Larry Richmond Sr. During her interview, Becky maintained that she was inside cooking dinner when she heard the gunshots and had no knowledge of who would want to hurt her husband. However, digital forensics experts performed a download of her cellular phone, discovering a deleted 4-minute phone call that she had received just minutes before the shooting occurred. The call had been placed by Larry Richmond Sr. When confronted with the hard records from the cellular provider, Becky admitted that she had lied about the call, claiming she deleted it to prevent investigators from suspecting she was having an affair with Larry Sr. She adamantly denied any involvement in her husband's murder. She was subsequently arrested and charged with obstruction of justice. The investigation took a critical turn when Larry Richmond Jr., eager to distance himself from the murder, cooperated with detectives. He revealed that his father was in possession of several illegal firearms and had buried a plastic container filled with guns in the backyard of Mandy's residence. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from a neighboring home, which showed Larry Sr. carrying a container and a shovel into the backyard under the cover of darkness. Officers executed a search warrant at the property, excavating the backyard and recovering a cache of firearms. while the exact murder weapon was. Not among them, the discovery of the hidden guns led to federal weapons charges against Larry Sr. As the case progressed, detectives uncovered a powerful financial motive.
On the
very morning after Robbie's murder, Becky had traveled to the fire station to inquire about her late husband's pension and life insurance benefits, a detail that deeply disturbed Robbie's colleagues and children. Investigators also secured the cooperation of an inmate who had shared a cell with Larry Sr. The inmate testified that Larry had confessed to the murder, explaining that he had planned the execution in conspiracy with Becky to secure Robbie's pension and clear the way for their secret romantic relationship. Using advanced digital forensics, investigators reconstructed the location data from Larry Sr.'s cellular phone on the night of the murder. The analysis placed his device in the immediate vicinity of Robbie's home, moving through the alleyways behind the property at the exact hour of the shooting. The records